welcome back to another episode of the unofficial companion podcast to HBO Max's hit show, Industry. I'm Jen.
I'm Kristen.
And we are the Wall Street Skinny, two lifelong friends, former investment bankers, and teachers who are here to break down everything in your favorite show, from the finance to the romance, and to give you the skinny on what's real and what's Hollywood. This is the season 3 premiere. And it's also Kristen's birthday, by the way. So happy birthday, Kristen. This is going to be a Kristen-heavy episode.
Well, there's a lot of like equity capital markets and like valuation stuff and IPOs and corporate finance. This is what I think I said to you before, that like, I don't know how we went from the CPS FX test to now like their equity capital markets. And like Robert is kind of like an investment bank. Like
We'll get there. We'll cover it all. So this episode is called, and pardon my lack of a proper Italian accent, Il mattino all'oro in la bocca. This is apparently an Italian phrase. I Googled it. It seems to vaguely translate to the early bird gets the worm.
Or the morning has gold in its mouth, something like that.
That's what the translation is, but that's like the morning has gold in its mouth. Doesn't mean shit to anyone.
Oh, 100%. But like later, because you'll hear, it does come up in the episode.
Say it in English.
Well, because someone says it in Italian, she then says the morning has gold in its mouth. But I did the same thing. I Googled like, what does that mean? And I also got the early bird gets the worm. So I'm with you. I was just for later when like it actually comes up.
We'll talk about it later. But my initial reactions to this before seeing the episode and Googling that was I was like, okay, is this harkening back to our insider trading plot line from the season finale of last season? We had that whole long conversation about being early on a trade, and being early on a trade is the same thing as being wrong. But you had already told me that Jesse is not back this season. So I was like, okay, I don't think that's it. So like, I don't know where we're going to go with this. We'll clearly just have to see.
And I actually still don't know this is why I love doing this with Jen, is I'm like, I still don't know what it means. So Jen will explain it to me when we get there.
Theories. But one thing before you start our plot recap is I actually also really loved the recap of what got us here. I always think it's interesting to see like how they craft that and what they choose to highlight. And it's easy to forget how far we've come with these characters. You see their orientation. You see Sarah talking about the original riff 6 months in, right? I just, really appreciated that because it makes you remember why you love these characters. But B, too, we should probably place this in the broader context of the show didn't catch on that much during seasons 1 and 2. You know, there was a big gap around COVID and things like that. But so season 3, that apparently is the season when this show really caught on. We didn't start our recaps of this show pretty much until season 3 was about to premiere and there was all this buzz around it. And everyone talks about this as like, this is the best season ever. So I feel like our hopes have been set really high.
Yeah. Well, and also just to provide that extra context, I guess this episode premiered August 11th of 2024. We had gotten so many messages from people on Instagram who kept asking us, we need to hear your take on Industry. Have you started watching Industry? Because we have a whole series where we went through Succession.
We still need to finish that.
We still have to finish season 4.
Once we finish Industry, we should go back and do Succession season 4, I think.
Yeah.
Is what we need to do, which is the best.
But I do think that it's helpful color because, again, just going into some of the things that they talk about and the plots and the themes are stuff that are actually kind of so topical now. And so it is interesting because like in the past, we were looking at it almost from this like archaeological, right? It
was like excavating the themes of COVID. And now it's like, who cares about that anymore? And now everything is much more timely in the 2024, 2025 call it context.
Yeah. So Jen, by the way, she basically was like, what fever dream was this? It was so funny getting her takes in real time. I actually, when I went back, because I have seen the whole of season 3, which, I mean, we'll get into like our feelings on it at some point, but I actually liked this episode better. It made more sense seeing it the second time, knowing kind of where it's headed. But I totally understand where you're coming from. We were just like, what just happened?
Especially with the season finale so fresh in my mind. It felt like this was a massive departure. So let's get into it.
Okay, so the show opens and it's basically a flashback on this yacht. So Yaz is on a yacht named Lady Yasmine. And so She does not look like she is having a good time. She looks miserable.
Remember where we left Yasmine. We knew that she was no longer going to be working for Celeste. As far as we know, she doesn't have a job at Pierpoint. So she's on this yacht. To me, I was like, she's on the beach, right? Like she is without a job. But remember, like where we left her, she had tried to make a clean break with her dad. To the best of our knowledge, she was like penniless and starting from scratch. What is she doing on a yacht that's named after her? So it's likely her dad's, if she has in fact made a clean break with her dad. So to me, it was like, okay, she has now gone back into the fold with her dad and is living out her life as the entitled heiress who doesn't want to pursue a career, who doesn't want to be professional. And also just like watching the scene on the boat before we get into any action, just as they give us the framework, she looks so annoyed. They did such a good job crafting this scene because everyone else is like drunk, spraying champagne. She's like, ugh, gross. I felt hungover watching this scene. Like she's in this stuffy cabin inside, drinking, listening to just annoying conversation all around her. Everyone's talking in Spanish. I felt ill just watching it. So they did such a good job showing what should otherwise be like, oh my God, such an aspirational thing. And you're like, I want off this boat within the first like 30 seconds of the camera panning around. So we actually get our first.
The only like scene is one that Jen was like, I will never recover from this. But she basically,
you told me, Kristen, in our last episode that there was way less sex and drugs in this season, and the first shot
is her father having sex with like a pregnant yacht worker in her room on her bed. It was this was not what I was promised. No. Well, I still think there's less. Maybe I just remember it less, but I really do. I think they do take it down a notch. But anyway, also random fun fact, because I was listening to a podcast this past weekend with a guy who wrote a book called The Have and the Have Yachts. The difference between a yacht and a boat is that the yacht has a crew. I didn't know that, but it was about how like
that either.
It was about how
that's a great title. Whoever you are, that is a great pun. I was talking
to you about this. There's obviously like so much populism here in the US, but one of the things that this guy found is that as Americans, people have equal amounts of disgust with the visualization of wealth and like billionaires and stuff, and also like aspirations to be it, where it's basically 50-50. So it was so funny that like we open on a yacht and I was like, oh, I just learned this fun fact.
Oh,
so
awesome.
Yeah. So then next scene, it flashes to 6 weeks later.
Wait, no. Sorry. There's an important plot point that Yasmine is like recovering from the trauma of seeing this and is standing up on the deck. And some girl takes a picture of her on her phone. Oh, and you're like, okay, cool. Like, what does this mean? You don't think anything of this plot point, right? That somebody's taking a photo of Yasmine. And the next thing we know, it's a hard cut to Yasmine asleep in bed. And it says 6 weeks later. So you're like, what just happened? How did we get here? What's going on?
Yes. And so she gets up from her bed, she looks out and she sees a paparazzi hiding in her trash can. And she basically like screams, runs downstairs, and the paparazzi is asking where her father is. So, by the way, the paparazzi then like gets hit by a car.
She acts like Alec Baldwin, right? Like she's ready to fight this guy.
Yeah.
And he's backing up, gets hit by a cab.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, and so Robert runs out and he's like, is this the same guy? So clearly we now know, there's a pattern of paparazzi taking photos of Yasmine. But also I'm like, Robert, she's living with Robert. Are they together now? Are they a couple? Right. Did I get my dream? Like, what's going on? I'm so confused at this point. Like, what is going on?
Yes. So I did think it was funny. She just seems very angry with him throughout this whole episode. And she just says to him saying, is that the same one? She's like, where the fuck were you? And he's like trying to be nice. He's like, should we call the police? And then she's like, he was hiding in your trash. Or he uses the term skip, which I guess is British. But like, I don't know. It just seems like
Robert's fault that there was a paparazzi hiding in a dumpster in the middle of the night outside of his apartment that they're living in together. It's bizarre.
Yeah. So next scene, we now are on the trading floor. And Jen, I might let you take this because you were very excited about this. It's basically
my God. Okay. So we have a new character who appears to be a social media influencer on the trading floor. we have officially made a clean break with reality, guys. Okay. You would never in a million years be able to film Instagram and TikTok content while working for a broker dealer. You pretty much are not allowed to have your cell phone out on the trading floor. Certain firms like are a little bit more lax with the rules if like you have family and stuff that you're caring for or whatever. But like I will literally call my husband on a recorded line and be like, are we getting pepperoni or cheese pizza for dinner? Like it's that intense. So I don't even know where to start with this plot line. But okay. So we've got a little bit of a theme being set up where Yasmine is having pictures taken of her against her will. And we have this new character whose name is Sweet Pea. I wasn't sure if this was like a British term of affection or if this is actually this woman's name, who now has the agency and is taking photos of herself. And she's going through this outfit of the day and like talking about her cell phone case and stuff like that. She actually is talking through to her followers, like what you're supposed to do as a new analyst. So she's like, as I always say, always be the first on the floor, and ABSBB, always be securing that bag, bish. And I mean, cringe, right? But this is like a terrible send up, I think, of like ABC, always be closing, the Glengarry Glen Ross quote that old school bankers used to use ubiquitously before American Psycho became the quotable movie de rigueur. But as soon as she finishes recording, like Yasmine's walking in and this woman shows a little bit of self-awareness and she's like, God, I sound like a fucking freak. And she says she just hit 50K followers. And for us, this is also so weird, by the way, because imagining myself in my old life where no one's allowed to touch social media while you're on a trading floor, like you can't send a personal email, you can't like open your phone to check Facebook, anything like that, to now us having a social media based business and talking about this. Everything's just like so full circle.
Well, and just to double click on what you had said, not only is Yaz getting this attention, which is very much unwanted, and it's also bringing unwanted attention to the firm. Here you have Sweet Pea, who is seeking out this attention, trying to get it, and nobody says boo about it.
Well, we'll talk about this, right? Because it's funny. I also thought about our title, The Early Bird Gets the Worm. Sweet Pea is being the early bird. She is doing the right thing of getting there before everyone else as the most junior person on the desk. Yeah. So I also wondered, again, upon a second watching of this, when I like got over my shock of seeing an Instagram influencer on a trading floor, of like, is this setting Sweet Pea up as the person who's ultimately going to be rewarded for her behavior somehow? I have no idea, not having seen any further than this episode. But so she goes, it feels like a full-time job. And Yaz is like, you're at your full-time job, okay? Like, and by the way, though, it is. It is her full-time job. Homegirl has a ring light set up on her desk. So clearly this is like ongoing. It's just totally insane. But Yasmine seems like she just doesn't care. She's at work and she's removing a cloak with a hood that she wore to the office. So it's very clear that she's having to like walk around incognito because she's that chased by the paparazzi, which is insane. And by the way, looking at Yasmine, gone is our fresh-faced new hire of yours. She looks haggard and tired. And like deliberately, right? It's not like the actress had a bad day. Like they are making Yasmine look like it's not going well.
Yeah. The other big thing, she's at a PWM. Guess what? She's back on the trading floor. So you're kind of like, well, who is she working with? And that Sweet Pea woman has a website up where it says the embezzler heiress, and it's a photo of Yaz on the boat with that cigarette. And Sweet Pea is sort of like stunned. She's like, oh shit. Like, right. She sort of feels like she's caught red-handed looking at this story.
No, I don't think she's caught red-handed.
Oh, I did.
She feels so bad. She's being empathetic to Yasmine.
She is. But I still think if you knew that there was some huge story.
I totally understand that reading as
well. Yeah. Just like it's one thing to sort of be in the know about this and to empathize and talk about it. It's another to be like actively reading the article that is calling her the embezzler heiress. And so.
And she says, at least they didn't mention that you work at Pierpoint. And Yasmine says, the fact that I actually work would fuck with their narrative. So that goes back to our haves and have-yachts, which I'm going to quote forever. We know that Yasmine is a have-yacht who has not, right?
Yes.
Like
she have yachts when she has her dad's money. She have not when she has none of her dad's money.
Exactly,
none of her dad's money.
Exactly. But we have no idea what the scandal is with her dad, by the way. And Yasmine does clarify that she deleted all of her social media and reinforces that this photo was taken 6 weeks ago. We remember when it was taken on the yacht.
Mm-hmm. And she says that someone basically just like ripped it off of someone else's Instagram and that the newspaper is trying to make it look like this is current. So I guess the way that the scandal is being presented is like it recently came out. There's something with her dad, something with embezzlement, and the newspaper is trying to make it look like she is currently on a yacht, which she is not. She's actually like at work. And so obviously Yaz just wants nothing to do with this. So she's like trying to not jab at Sweet Pea, but basically like, where are the Lumi decks? So they're gearing up for an IPO of some company called Lumi. And Sweet Pea, by the way, like does seem like she's, despite the influencer angle, like she does seem like she's actually decent at her job. So she's like,
100%.
She's already anticipated that Yaz is going to need this. So the decks are underneath her arm. And she asks if Yaz wants her to build a risk indicator model.
She says, I built one during my rotations.
One.
She did a rotation through risk and equity trading. So I totally agree with you, by the way. Sweet Pea is such an interesting introduction of like a next gen version of this new analyst. We had Yasmine, who I feel like comes from our generation, if you will, like in terms of how she's positioned. We had
Which is wild because she's also like 10 to 15 years younger than us, but like she acts like a millennial.
We had Venetia, who was the counterpoint to that old guard. And then we've got this new option C, this like confident, modern, also plugged into social media woman. So maybe like a little less believable, but I like her. She seems competent and she doesn't seem like she's likely to fall victim to the institution the same way that her predecessors all did in one way or another. Yeah. Just in this opening scene, they've set all that up with her. So big fan of Sweet Pea so far, even if it seems just wildly unrealistic.
Yeah. Although then she says, James Ashford has called 3 to 4 times, I guess, in response to Lumi's Q2 earnings. And Yaz again snaps at her and says, why would that not be the first thing you tell me? And Sweet Pea kind of gives her this strange look and like almost isn't even fazed by Yaz yelling at her. Yeah. And then just says, are you worried they're going to fire you? You know, the article, your dad just left, right? He just disappeared. Have you heard from him since? And she doesn't give her the time of day and then just like picks up the phone. So this next scene is a client call with James Ashford. So she's on the phone with him. The guy, James, says that he's tried calling Henry, who we're going to find out is the CEO of this company called Lumi. So tried calling Henry all last night. And Yaz says, look, I'm sure he's swamped with some last minute pre-IPO marketing. And James replies, he should be reassuring existing investors, not courting new ones. I just have a whole bunch of like question marks and then write, huh? Because we're going to get into this. Like, I did not understand this James guy. I think he was like trying to introduce that there is potentially some issues going on at the company, but like so much of it is very confusing.
Well, actually, this is a question from me to you because this entire sequence that we go through with James Ashford coming from his country estate where he's like collecting eggs from his chickens to driving into London against his,
3 hours
against his wishes, to come meet with Henry. Before an IPO, would it be normal for the pre-IPO company to be doing outreach to investors? Like, what would those conversations be like? I truly have no idea.
Well, I think it might be helpful to remind people of what the process of sort of funding looks like as you kind of go through almost like the stages of growing a business. So when a company is first looking to take their idea and bring it into an actual product, they need to raise money. And typically the first people you talk to are like friends and family, right? Like you go to your dad, you go to your friend from college, like throw me 25K, like, you know, can you give me 5K, whatever. That's your friends and family round, which we're going to find out this guy was like part of, which, so that by in and of itself is like, okay, wait, what? Then you start to raise money from like angel investors, venture capital firms, potentially growth equity firms, which it also is going to sound like that's where Peerpoint, who we find out is invested, probably got in along the way. And then the whole purpose of an IPO is, and there's multiple purposes. It could be that the company needs more money to continue to fund further operations, right? So like you go out, you raise, again, similar to like if you were to do a VC funding round, like it's the same idea. You're raising money, only you're now able to tap a broader investor base of hedge funds, retail investors, what have you. And And it also can be a liquidity event for the existing investors. Now, the thing that is so confusing about this is, again, this in theory should be a way for this dude who initially invested, like I said, is the friends and family round, to be able to monetize his investment.
Yeah.
Now, here's the other little point too, is that, again, you are not guaranteed, if you were an investor earlier, that you're going to be able to exit at this point. So when you go public, let's say you have a $1 billion company, you're typically going to only take anywhere from 10 to 20% public. So you're only going to be raising, call it, $100 to $200 million on a $1 billion valuation. So again, this random dude isn't necessarily going to be able to sell out. That's number one. And on top of that, as we think about, okay, what is the mix of like the money that you are getting from these new investors who are buying in? Where is that cash going? Because there's a split between primary and secondary proceeds or primary and secondary shares. So in some cases, you could do an IPO and literally zero of the founders cash out because all of the money is going to like general corporate purposes or paying down the debt. Or you could have 100% going to existing shareholders. That's called the secondary proceeds. Again, primary goes to the company, secondary goes to the investors. But the idea that this guy is angry about the valuation and all this stuff, like, this is why this whole thing to me was very confusing. And I feel like he was a vehicle to introduce this idea that there's potentially issues at the company that we're going to find out about. But like, it didn't make sense, his hostility towards this IPO, and then ultimately what happens with him. Like, so that's why I was so confused.
In just a second. Okay, cool.
So,
all right. So that's really helpful color for someone like me who's never been part of an IPO process and never really traded equities.
Right.
So, all right. So then we go back to the office as Yasmine is kind of seeming confused and reeling from this call. Kenny and Venetia walk in. So, okay, like a lot of our cast of characters are back, which is great. Yeah. And Venetia immediately does the same thing that Sweet Pea did. She starts trash talking the newspaper that's publishing that gossip about Yasmine in solidarity. We hear Rishi, by the way, in the background, trash talking about Anraj, who I don't think we've ever properly been introduced to.
We hadn't, but he made an appearance, I think, in like season 2, episode 8.
Maybe. Like, I don't remember this guy being like a major player in any way, shape, or form. So it seems like we're going to get someone else on the trading desk, which I'm excited about. Yes. The guy has a mustache, and they're comparing him from everyone to Tom Selleck, to David Seaman, who I had to look up, who's apparently like a goalkeeper for Arsenal, whatever. And then there was this interesting line where Venetia asks, although I can't tell if she's asking Sweet Pea or Yasmine, and I wonder if that's deliberate, if she's been offered a boo-hoo campaign yet. And I was like, what the heck is a boo-hoo campaign?
I think it's an influencer, is it?
Yeah. So it was a fast fashion brand called Boohoo in the UK that did a social media campaign where they were encouraging women to post photos of themselves without makeup and without filters. And apparently it was concurrent with a crackdown in the UK on the use of filters in social media posts advertising skincare products. So like, this is actually such an interesting little nugget, especially in light of something that you shared the other day, Kristen, about what Jonathan Haidt said. And I want to get to that in just a second. But I think it's really interesting that there's a couple of dual meanings here. First of all, like when I hear boo-hoo, I think like, oh, sob story, right? So when I heard that immediately, have you been offered a boo-hoo campaign? I thought she was talking to Yasmine, and like, have you been offered a chance to sell your sob story in the press? Like, that's how I interpreted that. And then I was like, wait a minute. No, once I Googled that, I'm like, okay, is she asking Sweet Pea if she's been offered a campaign with this fast fashion brand now? And it's funny, Yasmine looks at her in a confused way. So I also think it then brings in the concept of without a filter, because these girls know that this photo of Yasmine where she's on a yacht, this external projection of Yasmine as being a have yacht. These girls, I'm obsessed with this now. They know how bleak Yasmine's life is behind the scenes, no matter how glamorous it seems in photos. And they know what the industry is like behind the scenes as compared to what it is. So I just thought there were like so many layers to this one comment that I'm probably reading way too much into. But can you share for our listeners the Jonathan Haidt thing from the other day? Because I thought was so interesting just to bring this forward into pop culture today.
Yeah, there was, I guess, this whistleblower from Meta who shared that one of the things that Facebook, or I think it was Instagram, Meta, whatever, they're all obviously under the same umbrella, that they would do to literally teenage girls is if they saw that, say, a teenage girl deleted all of her selfies that showed that she was feeling insecure about how she looked, they would then blast her with makeup ads. So it was like an in to selling her makeup products, which is so disgusting. And you had kind of made this point when we were talking about Rhode and again, I have nothing against Hailey Bieber, but just like this idea that there's all these makeup brands that are on social media that are almost like preying on young girls and stuff. And like, I was kind of like, oh, whatever, Jen, you're being dramatic. And then I see this whistleblower say this and I was like, oh my God, like that
100%.
is effing horrible.
Yeah.
And again, this is nothing to do with Rhode. I'm not saying Rhode is doing this, but again, like these makeup brands that are on these platforms that prey on teenage girls. Like this isn't, it's one thing like if you're an adult and you're getting, whatever, like Jen, you and I will get like facelift because we share a social media. So like you'll get like, facelift content or like,
oh my God, I have been
trying to sell us
100% ever since Kylie Jenner came out with the details of her boob job. Unfortunately, I've been watching every video of every woman describing like her various breast implant surgeries. Like I'm studying for the bar exam. So yeah, I was sending Kristen content being like, Kris Jenner's face, in fact, wasn't even a facelift. It's just an AI photo of her. Like, whatever. It can't be real.
Yeah.
What are we doing? But yeah, we are consenting adults who know what we're subjecting ourselves to. We are fully formed humans and we can make our own stupid decisions.
Yes. So that was so horrifying to me. But yeah, so Kenny is then sort of like, guys, we have an IPO that is coming. Like in the next 48 hours, I'm putting a moratorium on giving airtime to the tawdry bullshit. Back to the coalface, everybody. Now, please. Likely referencing the newspaper. And I do think that,
by the way, I've never heard the term coalface, but
same. It comes up later. They use the term twice.
They use the term twice. We always say like another day in the salt mines here, talking about working on the trading floor. So like that's how I took it to mean.
And I actually just one more thing, because we are going to find out like what Lumi does, and they do sell energy and power. Ooh. So who knows if that's all related, because we are going to get into a slight power primer a little bit later, which is going to be fun. So anyway, Rishi then says, ooh, IPO buildups. I get this fucking twinge, sort of showing just the excitement leading up to the IPO.
Rishi and then does like nothing in this episode.
He doesn't. They do have later off-camera dialogue, but it was funny. I liked the difference and the contrast between the off-camera dialogue at Future Dawn versus like the trading floor. It was so more female coded versus anyway.
I made that note later too. Okay, continue.
Okay. So next scene, we are now introduced to Jon Snow, which is sorry I had to.
I have him in my notes as Jon Snow until about halfway through the episode when I finally
give him the proper name,
which is Henry Muck. Muck. I want to touch on for a second. When you think about muck, you think of like getting in the. I didn't think of that. I thought of getting down in the dirt. Like muck is another word, but also muckrakers are people who like stir up shit in the news, digging up things in people's past and things like that. So 3 different meanings. We've got muck from muckety muck. We've got
they all work.
Muckraker and being down in the muck, like down in the mud, right? So love it. 3 different interpretations there. One other thing. Sorry, what I actually wrote in my notes. It is only 1 letter removed from Musk. So there is no coincidence there, I think, that we're drawing parallels to Elon Musk as the CEO of Tesla, the electric car, right? The darling of this entire ESG movement when it first came out.
So next thing, we were at the Lumi offices, the office of Jon Snow, aka Henry Muck. And he's like talking to some reporter. And so he says, the mission is to bring renewable energy at affordable prices to as many people as possible. And behind him, you hear Robert's cell phone go off and Yasmine calls him to tell him that James Ashford is on his way. You also see Aurora there. Like she is going to be a player through the entire season. But Yaz tells Robert.
It's also very interesting given that Aurora was being nominated to a healthcare post within the government. So what the heck is she doing at a renewable energy company?
I don't know. Who knows? So
I've been questioning this whole time how much time has actually gone by, because it's not 6 weeks since episode 8 of season 2. It seems like it may be years at this point.
True. So Yaz tells Robert that James Ashford is coming to the office. He's worried about the Q2 earnings. And Robert acts like Henry is too busy because he's in this interview. And Yaz is like, you're not a fucking press officer. The whole point of you crossing the wall is so you can manage him for peer point. So by the way, wall crossing is this idea that there is, and it used to be called like the Chinese wall. I feel like that might be sort of non-PC anymore. It's now, I think, just called the wall. But you have a separation between the people who have non-public information. So that's more of like the investment bankers, and then the sales and trading division. So if you're in sales and trading, basically everything is in the public domain. If you are in investment banking, you have access to, again, this inside info that the regular public does not. And so when you have this IPO, you oftentimes need to bring people over the wall, which, by the way, this has, like, I didn't even write this in my notes, but like, how fucking amazing is that given like Game of Thrones and the wall? I just like, I had to. So
I wasn't thinking about that.
Yeah, I wasn't either, but yeah.
It's this massive compliance protocol that you have to go through. And also it has implications for you from your personal portfolio standpoint.
Yeah.
Because once you're brought over the wall, you go from being someone who can be a little bit freer in terms of like your personal investments because you don't have any material non-public information. You know more than the average person. So you have to report all of your trades and stuff like that. But you may suddenly find yourself like having freely been able to trade in a given security prior to being now locked up in that position with no warning, right? And you've talked about this before, how that you had someone who had like terrible consequences.
They got stuck in a horrible trade because they couldn't sell out because they had to start working on some deal. But yeah, so back to the interview. The interviewer says, questions around the purpose of going public won't go away. And someone pipes in and says, it wouldn't be so crude to use the phrase cash grab, but... And then Henry tries to answer the question by spinning it into some noble mission, right? And the interview doesn't seem to be going all that great. But he says, there are the typical whispers you get around something this seismic. And I might add that the Luddites always sharpen their knives for disruptors. Aurora says, crude scrutiny is important. And Henry says, and no one is more scrupulous than me. See what animates me after a long day's mission? Personally, I find sleeping under the desk gives me a deeper sleep, which does go back to your Elon Musk commentary because he was sort of known to do that. The reporter looks just confused. And then Henry was like, oh, that was just me being funny. Can we cut that? It didn't really land. So he's like, let's maybe take that out of the interview. But I do think it is important to touch on why companies go public. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it's like, number one, the company might need money. Now, in this case, it does seem like it is an exit for the existing investors, but like, there's nothing wrong with that. That is literally like right now, there's actually a problem where it's like, we have too many companies that are staying private for too long and not going public. And the number of public companies has shrank drastically. We've talked about that on the big podcast. Again, there's like, you look at the number of public companies back in like, 2000 versus today, and it's gone down massively. It also gives the company that goes public basically like acquisition currency. So if they needed to, they could go out and they could buy other companies using their own stock. And it's also seen as prestigious. So like, obviously this is a made up company. So I don't know like the history of this company. I'm going to say this like a lot of times later, but like usually people are going to be like grilling a company going public. I mean, like, I don't know. So what were we going to say?
The only additional color I have to offer, I do think that they have to do a little bit of exposition to educate the public on like why people do and don't go. Like there needs to be that element of founders cashing out.
Which is a real reason why people go public.
And it's not a bad reason.
And it's not even the founders. It's also the investors. It's also that random guy, James Ashford, who like.
But I think the implication here that we're starting to build narratively is that the founders and the people who have the biggest stake in the company are trying to basically hit a bit at the highs when this company does not have good long-term prospects, and basically like play the greater fool theory with the public who's going to end up holding the bag. Yeah.
100%.
Oh, and by the way, the irony of Aurora saying crude scrutiny is always important must be lost on no one, because we know that it was through her efforts of shutting down the scrutiny on and then reopening the scrutiny of the whole Fast Aid deal that led us to the big insider trading scandal that has now gotten her promoted to apparently not only health secretary, but I don't know, like environmental secretary, whatever she is now. I also want to point out that Lumi's office, their logo is absurd, right? They have like half an umlaut over the U, so it looks like Liumi, and it looks like a Dr. Seuss version of what progressive office design looks like in the post-WeWork era. It reminded me so much of the sets in the Apple TV series of We Crashed, which was the WeWork show. We did a whole deep dive on that on the main podcast if you want to listen to that.
We're going to link, by the way, to both our IPO 101 episode and then also the WeWork episode, which basically is like a failed IPO and SPACs.
Yeah. But like the office itself, along with that line of I like to sleep under my desk at 3 a.m., is just very much strategically placing Lumi and Muck in this grand tradition of the tech founder, right? The founder 100%. Bro, you know, the hustle culture zeitgeist.
So the next scene, we're back at Pierpoint and it's a partners meeting and Eric makes partner. And this is something that, Jen, we actually are going to be airing an episode on the main podcast with a partner at Goldman Sachs. But it's interesting because in like the law world, the highest tier you can make is a partner. And they're usually partner. A named partner. Oh, a named partner. This is true. But like there, you're an owner. You have to buy in. You actually, it's funny, right? Like we talk about equity in an IPO. Like you actually have to give cash because you have to buy in. You are now an equity partner in the law firm.
You're paid in stock at banks, unfortunately, now. So like you're an equity owner starting from about like your associate year onward, whether you want to be or not.
This is fair. But again, most law firms are not public. But yeah, so with this partner meeting, one of the few firms out there that still have partners is Goldman. But it's interesting, Jen, I wanted you to talk a little bit about this because we had a whole back and forth in one of the early episodes about the fact that Daria was like a VP potentially up for MD. And we were like, that makes no sense. Well, actually for example, Goldman, where there is no, like, they have the
director level. They have no level, apparently, between VP and managing director, at least in like the institutional investment banking, sales and trading roles. I don't know if they do elsewhere within the firm.
Yeah. But anyway, so the point is that most banks, you don't really hear people talk about partners anymore. Like that's not a tier. However, the one bank that still has it is Goldman.
There may be others, to be clear. There may be like smaller elite
fair.
boutiques, but of the big bulge bracket banks, Goldman had this old tradition of being a partnership from before they went public, and they've retained that. And being a partner, it's not just another leg on the ladder in terms of the scale. It's not a given. So like for the average bear at insert city, Bank of America, et cetera, as you get promoted, you go from analyst, associate, VP, some made up title that could be director, executive director, senior vice president, whatever. And then managing director is kind of the highest that you can climb. And then division head, desk head, et cetera, you're all still just called managing director. At Goldman, managing director may still be the highest rung to which you can climb, but there is this level above it of partner where you are already a managing director, but you are made partner and you're part of like this inner circle of decision makers, that you have special privileges, you probably have special economics, and they range too, depending on where you are within the institution, like how much political clout you have as a partner, et cetera.
So anyway, Eric gets his partnership. He gets some, I think it's like cufflinks. And as Adler, who by the way is the one who's sort of leading the charge there, as Adler is giving him these cufflinks, he's like cotton to credit default swaps in our 150th year. He says, think of it as a gift from our founders, Randolph and Mortimer Pierpoint, straight to you. And then Eric replies, they were a family of slavers, right?
Wait.
Which like,
are there actual names, Randolph and Mortimer Pierpoint?
I'm sure.
No, because that's not possible. Randolph and Mortimer Duke are the two villains of Trading Places. Like, I was like, this is 100% a Trading Places joke, right? Like, they cannot conceivably be Randolph and Mortimer Pierpoint, can they? Like,
that's amazing.
There's just no way. Or that was just a wink at people who've seen, but I assume
it's definitely a wink at people who've
Randolph
seen it.
And Mortimer Duke.
You say this all the time. Like, there's not a word out of place. Like, they 100% know Mortimer and Randolph or whatever.
But like, they make so many insidery references that we've had to Google. Like, this is for most people in finance, not a Googleable reference. It's like saying Patrick Bateman was the founder of Pierpoint. While you may not remember it.
I know who Patrick Bateman is.
No, but you didn't remember the Randolph and Mortimer reference. So I'm saying, while some may not remember it, I thought it was a joke, but there wasn't a wink in the show, so it's possible that it wasn't. Like,
yeah, I don't know. Maybe they assume that it's old enough that the people that are watching this are not going to like make the tie. So anyway,
I don't know.
So yeah, so the next cut, the meeting has now begun, and somebody says the Pierpoint's been overexposed in sales and trading. This has been ameliorated by our commitment to the green shift. So ESG is going to be like a huge thing this season,
right?
What?
But also what? Like,
yeah.
What?
So
what? Like,
yeah.
that doesn't make any sense. But then again, in the zeitgeist, right, I guess, like, you're being punished for having been too successful at sales and trading, so now you need to go invest in green company. Like, that's not what an investment bank does. It just doesn't make any sense.
No, there's a lot that is a little iffy on this. But so Adler then says, and on the day of his partnership, it's important we credit Eric's work in the trenches. Lumi is the first in a pipeline of environmental, social, and governance-oriented deals. We have a suite of in-demand, ethical, and social impact IPOs that we've won over competitors. And a board member then says, look, ESG is a great marketing tool, and I'm sure it's helped PurePoint's stock price to be included in the ethical investment basket. But shouldn't we be wary of increasingly gearing our balance sheet towards a fad? Eric looks like, excuse me, like he can't believe somebody said that out loud. And the same guy then replies, woke investing, greenwashing. So our business model isn't a rigorous balance sheet examination. We just look at the org chart and then Chatham House rules apply. And by the way, Chatham House rules, it's like a confidentiality agreement used in meetings to encourage open and frank conversations. So it allows people to basically say what they want freely, but then like not to be penalized for saying it.
To be clear, by the way, there's only one Chatham House rule.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. But it's an old-fashioned way of saying this is a safe space, which I think is kind of hilarious. Like, this is all off the record. These ideas can be tossed around freely here, but I'm not going to be named as the person who said this in like the official court transcript of this.
Yeah. Well, he says, after he says Chatham House rules apply, pray the CEO is a black lesbian with one leg, and then without even meeting her, sign they, them, a blank check. Have I got that right? So a redheaded woman who we have not met yet, she's a board member. We later find out that she's this new CFO, Wilhelmina. She pipes in saying, I'm sorry. And then air quotes, Chatham House rules means carte blanche for bigotry. Eric says, maybe you can leave your cynicism at the door while this trade still has legs. And then again, that Wilhelmina woman says, PurePoint Asset Management, our private equity division, is heavily invested in these companies. Lumi, Europa, Gaz out of Frankfurt. So like clearly just naming some of these different companies.
Europa Gaz.
But like, what?
Well, I actually think this was a brilliantly written positioning of this central tension.
Yes.
Okay. Everyone in the pop culture zeitgeist is talking about ESG as the hot new thing. And this guy has this scathing send up of what he thinks it really is and what it potentially becomes when taken to an absurd length and implemented through perhaps originally well-intentioned, but ultimately ineffective, flawed policies. So I thought where we were going with this originally was going to be this like starry-eyed view of ESG, but they have like a no holds barred approach to ESG here. I thought this was actually a fabulously written scene. And then, by the way, as they exit this meeting, they have this brilliant conversation where Eric asks Adler if Wilhelmina is just a DEI hire effectively. And Adler's like, she's actually been here for like 20 years. You never noticed her because we didn't basically give her any face time within the organization. Now she's our new CFO effectively for greenwashing.
ESG purposes.
ESG purposes 100%. And then Adler changes the subject and tells Eric he's been notified by their PR people about Yasmine, something about embezzlement and blah, 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 blah. And like, Eric is like, oh, like she's been bounced around a few other desks. Like Kenny has been really vouching for her. Like we also get the color that Kenny is now an ED. So he's been promoted from VP. So we do know that they have that intervening level within the
that's a good point. 100%.
So we still have that level. And then you can make partner on top of everything. Adler says she was a nepotism hire. Should we do the honorable thing and put her out of her misery? Management in New York wouldn't mind seeing your teeth again. We are leaning out at random over there, cutting across every level from AN1 to MD. I'm sure it's not lost on you how late this partnership has come in your career. I lobbied hard for you. I said, look around this room. It looks a little monochromatic. No. So much in this, by the way. Eric
now he's
totally
saying,
horrified.
Yes, because he's like,
I'm joking. That was an ESG joke. But so there is this brilliant piece of writing where all of a sudden it's like the Spider-Man photo where everyone's pointing. It's like, you're the DEI hire. No, you're the DEI hire. No, you're the DEI hire, right? DEI and ESG has become this power chip that you can levy against someone by planting the seed that you are the DEI hire, that you just got promoted by ESG. All you are doing is completely invalidating all the hard work that this person has done, right? So even though Adler's joking, many a true thing said in jest. And so by planting that seed in Eric's brain, you see Eric's reaction. He's like, oh, so you need me to fire someone because you suspect that I'm not actually an effective manager, even though you've just made me partner. So Eric had one moment to celebrate and the rug has been pulled out from him now. And he's been completely defanged by Adler with the mere suggestion that he might have been an ESG related hire. This is so brilliant. Also, I want to touch on one other thing when we're talking about the levels. He said AN1. I have literally never heard anyone use that term for first year analyst. I have only
see it on social media.
On social media, on insert random chat forum here. I don't think anyone in the real world says it. So like, to me, that felt like a piece of lazy writing. Guys, please correct me if you're wrong, if you've ever heard someone say that with their mouth.
Honestly, though, wouldn't be surprised if it's like gone from being in the like social media world to now like to like the real, you know what I mean? It's like how life imitates art, imitates life.
Having asked one managing director on a trading floor if anyone ever used that term, the answer was no.
I'm sure.
But that's just one managing director. I'm sure there are many out there. So I would love to get your takes on it.
Well, one other thing I did want to touch on is this whole idea that like the private equity division is investing in these companies. Post 2008, there's limits on how much you can actually, same with, right, like trading your own book and being a prop trader. Same idea with investing the firm's own money. And this is in the US. So again, it could be different in the UK, but there is a cap that a bank can only invest up to 1% of tier 1 capital. Foreign banks do have less restrictions.
Sorry, I'm having so many light bulb moments. I interpreted this like we have an upcoming episode on the Big Podcast with someone who works at Morgan Stanley Real Estate Private Equity. That's not the firm's own money. Like they have outside investors to whom they have a fiduciary duty.
Well, so I don't know. And that's a good point. Like maybe it is that they are raising money from institutional investors and LPs. This whole thing to me was a little bit like, you're trying to make it so that the incentives are rotten with
not necessarily do the right thing.
And like that continues to come up.
The implication is that it's whatever the most nefarious interpretation, I think is probably the correct one. And I hadn't known about that. And one last point on this little speech that Adler gave about leaning out at random. We previously had the stakes in season 1 of Riff. There was going to be a huge reduction in force amongst the analysts after just 6 months, right?
Yeah.
Now we have this looming threat that cuts are going to be made in a show of force across the firm. And Adler basically says, like, this is just the state of the industry now. I would argue that it's kind of been the state of the industry since time immemorial. You are never safe in your job, but this is something that happens when people ascend to power in either like a battlefield promotion or just by suddenly unlocking a new level. You do tend to see what feels like people being shot randomly in like that show of force. It does feel like that, certainly when you're like further down the chain. But the stakes here seem like to Eric, in order to stave off the threat of just being called another DEI hire, basically, he now needs to go out and fire someone. It feels like when you are accepted into the mob or in a gang that you need to prove to the gang, you need to go out and murder someone to show them that you're a made man. So this is Eric getting his brass ring of partner. He now needs to go out and shoot someone. That's how he's interpreting this, as you can see the camera kind of like consistently come back to his face. Now, Yasmine's a layup, right? Because Adler has already offered her up on a silver platter as the nepotism hire and said, like, shouldn't we just put her out of her misery? So in my mind, when Eric goes back down to the trading floor, the wheels are turning in his mind. Should I fire Yasmine?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Okay, so one other really quick thing that I did want to just point out is when they were talking about the fact that constant cuts are the state of our industry now. Adler says no better motivator than death. It's an interesting choice of words, and just like swirl that in the back of your head for like just that's it. Okay,
okay. Within this episode or more broadly within the season?
Broadly.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so Now, next scene.
Robert tells Henry that James Ashford is coming to the office. Henry seems really angry that he allowed this. And Robert says, he's one of your investors from the friends and family round. That's where we get that nugget that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's a minnow.
And Muck says, yes. And his investment is friends and family sized. He's fucking insignificant. Okay. So we touched on this earlier. I had in my notes, let's talk about this here, but we touched on it earlier, right? In terms of like the size of investments as a company grows. But then there's this great scene where an assistant brings Muck a snack and she says, I thought your blood sugar might be getting low. Like he's a child likely to throw a tantrum. And then she goes, sorry, they didn't have a keto option. Once more firmly placing him in this legacy of like men on these absurd diets, right? And so we're setting up this volatile character because as he and Robert go back and forth, he ultimately storms out of the room. I guarantee that like Kit Harington tried to throw that sandwich in the trash and like misses and it like bounces off. So Mr. Henry Muck is not having a good day.
No.
I'm going to call him Musk. I know this is going to happen. I definitely have in my notes that he's Musk and not Muck.
It's all good. So then in the next scene, they're back at the Pierpoint offices. And this is sort of setting up the relationship between Kenny and Eric. Like we had never seen them interact in the last season. Although if you remember, like when Eric first came down and Kenny's like, hello, Commander Tao. So they have this clear relationship. So as Eric is coming back down to the trading floor, Kenny is clapping and saying, congratulations. I know you've been through hell lately, but you deserve this. And so Eric thanks him. And Kenny then says, the good lady wife said she'll do chicken a la Eric this week if you want to drop by and celebrate. And Eric says, don't be ridiculous. I'll take you out. But this is setting up that there is a relationship that goes outside of the firm. Like they seem like they're like friends.
Oh my God. I'm like, wait. Eric is dining at Kenny's house with Kenny's wife, heretofore unmentioned, so often that she has a dish called chicken a la Eric. What is happening? Are pigs flying? Like, what alternate universe? So that's why I was like, what is this fever dream of an episode? Like, who are we where Kenny and Eric are now besties?
Yeah.
Talk about something I never anticipated. So, A, how much time has passed? B, what has gone badly for Eric? And C, what is the dynamic of the desk now? It feels like Kenny is de facto running this desk and Eric is their overlord. When he signed the partner book, it said head of sales, London. So he is no longer head of macro hedge fund sales, the desk that he cobbled together with that coup via Harper. He is now an entire level above that. He's had all of sales. So like this is a big freaking job. So for him to be besties with Kenny suggests to me that maybe Kenny is de facto now running macro hedge fund sales and Eric is his overlord in the hierarchy. But I was just like, sorry, is this a dream sequence? Like where are we?
Well, yeah, there's such different personalities. So they don't seem like they go together. But Eric then leads in and he whispers and he sort of nods to Yasmine asking, like, is her head in the game? And he said, level with me from a management perspective. Do we really need her? And Kenny is like, yeah, she's good. She's capable firsthand. Trust me. So he's going to bat for her, like Eric had said to Adler. And Eric says, with these rumors about her dad swirling around, I'm getting pressure from above. This is a reputation defining 24 hours ahead of us. I can't carry passengers. And Yaz then sensing that they're talking about her, like she gets up and she walks over to Eric and congratulates him. He doesn't even like turn to acknowledge her. No. He just like literally doesn't even make eye contact. And
they're like she mean girling her.
Well, he is. I mean, Kenny's, but
Kenny's not.
But she says, congratulations, very well deserved. He replies, I'm glad you think so. Like, what? So it was such an odd reply.
Also, just hearing you say that with those lines, remember, Yasmine hasn't deserved or earned anything in her career, right? So for her to be saying, I feel like there's this implication from Eric of, oh, that's rich coming from you. Like, you know what anyone does or doesn't deserve, that I didn't read into it until I just heard you say that line.
Poor Yasmine.
Why is she still such a bitch to Robert? Sorry, I'll stop.
Yeah, well, fair. Okay, so next scene we have James at Lumi. So it's sitting around the table, right? James is there live, and then you have Pierpoint conferenced in with Yaz and Kenny and Sweet Pea all listening. So James says, we've had some last minute concerns about your valuation based on the very sneakily timed earnings report with its surprising net debt figure. He says the debt profile of the company has seemingly shrunk overnight just as you're about to go public. And Henry says, so? James says, in your cash and cash equivalents, you've added in receivables, which you know won't get settled. I'm going to explain what that means in just a second. He said, you've calculated your indebtedness off of a net debt to EBITDA ratio, and it looks like you've massaged EBITDA to make the ratio decrease. Okay. So first of all, in general, when you're talking about kind of like the balance sheet health of a company, you often will look to certain things. So cash is one of them, debt is another, and then there's this ratio called leverage, which I'll sort of formally explain in just a second. First of all, when you're talking about how much cash a company has, there is a difference between how the accountants prepare it and what you as the CEO may consider to be your cash. Now, so just as like a quick example, right? Jen, you and I, we recently decided we had some cash in our bank account. We don't want to just sit it like in a lovely little, whatever, Bank of America account or whatever, just like earning, 0.1%, zero. So we decided, we're going to set up an investment account and put our money in investments. So companies do this all the time, right? They have cash and they're not going to want to just like literally leave it in like a bank account. So they will potentially invest it. Now, depending how they invest it, in some cases, you might put it into like a money market fund. That is going to be considered cash and cash equivalents on the accountant side of things. But if you were to say like, take your cash and invest it into say a 10-year US Treasury and you expect to hold it for 10 years, it actually doesn't show up in that cash and cash equivalents line. It might show up in like other long-term investments. So as again, a company is saying how much cash they have, it's actually not as simple as just saying, this is what the cash and cash equivalents number is. You might say it's this number plus I'm going to include like my treasuries. Maybe they have some investments in different like types of bonds that are liquid. So there is potentially some ways that a company could say, hey, this cash and cash equivalents is not the full extent of my cash. My cash is greater. What you typically do not do is add in receivables. So accounts receivables are where you have sold something to a customer. The customer has received the product, but they have not sent you cash yet. So it can be, months sometimes, like most of the time terms are like 210 net 30. Yes, Jen?
All part of the cash conversion cycle, may I
All
add.
part of the cash conversion cycle, yes. But so it might take 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Like there is it's going to take time from when the customer has received the product to when you get cash.
And now to put a fine point on this, the reason I came in with that stupid comment is because one of Kristen's superpowers is explaining this stuff. And if you guys haven't taken our course, I think you did like a short Instagram reel on the cash conversion cycle, which may be my favorite educational reel you've ever done. So that's why I was like, we have to talk about this. And then I suddenly realized that like no one's going to know why Jen's chiming in with her like David Allen Boucher, Magic 106.7 late night radio host voice about this.
But yeah, well, no. So again, the whole thing though is that when you're talking about the cash, if you're waiting for someone else to send you cash, like that is not money that is yours. You can't just be like, in the case of like that treasury, the US Treasury, you can go sell it tomorrow. You have to wait. So you do not include receivables as cash. So that is sketch. Now there is a concept called quick assets.
Wait, TLDR for anyone who's trying to convert this into the plot. This means Lumi has done something super sketchy, correct?
It means Lumi is overstating how much cash they have, and yes, that is sketchy. So that's number one.
Okay.
Now, the thing about the net debt thing is really, in my opinion, dumb because there is a difference between debt and net debt. And anyone who's an investor knows the freaking difference. So if Lumi's out there saying our net debt is this, like, you're like, cool, that's duh. So the whole idea with net debt versus debt is if you have a company and they have, call it $100 million of debt and $10 million of cash, they could take that cash and pay down the debt dollar for dollar. So a company that has, again, $100 million of debt and $10 million of cash is equivalent to more or less a company with $90 million of debt and no cash. So that is that idea of net debt. But again, it's a calculation that in finance professionals do. Like if you are someone reading an earnings report, like you should know the difference.
Effectively arithmetic, right? This isn't some like sneaky, so
no.
If I'm to understand correctly, they have overstated their cash balance by adding in receivables that they know they won't get, right?
Yes.
In order to shrink their net debt number, which is what would happen if you artificially inflate your cash balance. A company with lower net debt appears less leveraged, correct?
Yes.
Therefore, a safer company, all else being equal, from an investment standpoint. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes, that is 100%. But again, in my opinion, like if you are a investor who has taken one day of value. Like, that there is a difference between debt and net debt. But again, maybe they're calling it their debt. So who knows? Like, maybe there's some like funky monkey business going on there. And then the last piece is there's this ratio called the leverage ratio, which takes your debt over EBITDA. EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And it is a proxy for the operating cash flow of the business. And the thing is that this is not a quote unquote GAAP term or like an IFRS term. This is a term that, again, investing professionals use, but there is subjectivity. And this is actually a true story. When WeWork was going public, and we do have this episode where we talk about it, but this was a real thing. Adam Newman tried to massage their EBITDA, and they called it community adjusted EBITDA, where they basically added back every single expense. And like, they were like, see, like, look how great we're doing. And again, like, investors kind of saw right through that. But it is very real that if you are taking this term that is not a GAAP term, right? It is subjective. You can add back certain adjustments. You can include things. So yeah, you could inflate that. And then if you're saying my leverage ratio, which is a ratio that takes your debt over your EBITDA, and all of a sudden your EBITDA is higher because you've done these crazy adjustments, you look like you are a safer business than you actually are. So it's so funny that this ties into the WeWork thing, because that was like batshit crazy.
One of their crimes. Well, I don't think it's a mistake that they make their office look so similar. And
to
just
WeWork, yeah.
A point of clarification for all of our inspiring investment bankers out there. Obviously, debt and net debt, we can easily convert between the two, but is a leverage ratio, like in industry practice, typically a net debt to EBITDA ratio, or is it a
usually gross
debt?
Okay, usually gross.
Just curious.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you sometimes might calculate both, but the one that, again, your lenders typically care about, they're bearish, right? They want to know worst case scenario.
They want to know worst case scenario, yeah.
The number that you look at, for example, if you're talking about the leverage when you're doing a leverage buyout, is going to be on a gross basis. It is not netted. But again, like my one argument with this was like, again, if you're an investor, like, you should be able to see the difference. So, okay. So Henry then asks, what are you accusing me of? Ashford says, the earnings report, your first as a public company, will legally have to be published on your website for all to see. I mean, your website, and like with the SEC, I mean, like, or whatever governing body.
I was like, we're so worried about the website. Like,
yeah, no. This is like, I mean, this should technically like get filed with the SEC, and there should be auditors, by the way, who are making sure, like, if you haven't read Smartest Guys in the Room about like the Enron scandal, I mean, yeah, there's been some bad shit that's happened with audit. So anyway, that was like, wait a second, what? But he says, you're putting lipstick on the pig, and the last minute got me thinking, what else are you keeping from people? So I had my analyst up all night modeling what would happen if, say, given your debt profile, natural gas prices spike. My conclusion is you're sailing into a shitstorm on a shit boat. Okay, this got me really excited because, like, actually, if natural gas prices spike, that's probably a good thing for this company. So I want to explain really quickly the way that natural gas impacts these types of companies. Because, by the way, actually, one other little point is later on, Yasmine comes in and says, hi, James, it's Yasmine from Peerpoint on the line. She says, Lumi is at the forefront of the energy solar revolution. And the guy says, I keep hearing that. I don't know what that means. Okay. As you think about powering an entire country or state, there's a whole bunch of different types of like power plants. So in general, if you think about like what's called the power stack, is you have basically like nuclear. So nuclear is going to, like, once it's built, it's expensive to build, but once it's on, that thing is on. Coal, same thing. Coal is always running. Then you have other things. You have your renewables. So you have your wind, you have your solar, and then you have like your natural gas fired power plants. So in general, it typically is the case that natural gas sets the price of electricity. Now, why is that? Again, it goes back to the fact that there is supply and demand when it comes to the power grid. There's these different plants, some of which can be turned on and some which can't. Like, you can't turn off a nuclear reactor. Natural gas fired power plants, you can. And so typically what sets the price of power is the price of gas, because that is the expense for the, again, marginal power plant that has to be turned on, and it has to be profitable for those plants. So usually the price of power is set by natural gas. And it seems to me that Lumi has, I would assume, solar plants. Like, they have a whole bunch of solar farms and shit. But so if you're setting the price of power based on natural gas going up is actually a good thing for the profitability of a solar business. But like, that was why I was a little bit confused. It's like, wait a second, you're kind of getting it reversed.
Yeah, I truly didn't even think about like the broader context of turning lights on and off. I was thinking about heating homes and thinking that this was some disruptor that was bringing some kind of
solar was gonna
to natural gas like heating for your homes, which is obviously like a huge issue with natural gas prices that's soaring in Europe. And like, as we get more extreme temperature gradients on either side, we get like really cold winters and like really hot summers.
But again, like, I mean, if that was the case, if somehow they can like channel solar, if natural gas prices are going up, like, wouldn't that be a benefit? Because the alternative is the,
I'm not saying the economics would be any different. I thought that this was more about the retail consumer and their behavior rather than
but it's not power companies. Well, we need actually to do a whole other thing, because I assumed that they were somehow selling directly to retail customers, and that's a whole other topic that we need to do a conversation about, because power is really interesting. So I worked in project finance for like 9 months. It's not like I did a whole huge time there. My dad has worked developing solar plants and worked at an independent power producer. Like, he knows so much about all this power generation stuff. And he's currently like literally trying to get like solar plants hooked up in different states. And so it's interesting because like different states, there's deregulated electricity and deregulated natural gas markets, and then regulated electricity and regulated natural gas markets. And it varies by state. Fun fact, in most blue states, it is deregulated, and in most red states, it is not. The one exception is Texas, where it is deregulated, just like in the blue states, where in the places where it's not deregulated, it's basically like you have these utilities like Florida Power and Gas or whatever, who are essentially like little monopolies. And these regulated utilities essentially control the price of electricity because they guarantee themselves, they have like an 8% return. So they basically are the ones who are setting the prices, versus with, these deregulated markets, it's much more based on, again, the supply and demand. It's much more transparent. Yeah, it's much more transparent. Like, you can literally see like second to second, minute to minute, like what the price should be based on demand, blah, blah, blah. And the UK is similar to kind of like those deregulated markets. But it is something that is, I think, very confusing to most people. And even to me, like, I had to sit down with him for an hour and just be like, wait a second, am I correct in thinking that this is like completely reversed, because natural gas should be good for most solar companies? And he was like, yeah.
So the takeaway for someone like me who is not an expert in this sector and not an expert in corporate finance is effectively he's overstating his cash position to then minimize the leverage that they have. And what Ashford is suggesting here is that in fact they are very levered. Therefore, if there were to be some crisis, and the crisis that he's stipulating is a world in which natural gas prices go higher, and you're saying that's not in fact a crisis, that would drive consumers to a lower price point product, which would be
no. It would mean that the price, it would mean that theoretically he could sell higher, and actually it might even make their products look better. But like, the market price of electricity should be higher in general.
So
like,
it would just, it's actually, a rising tide floats all boats is what you're saying. It wouldn't be like an out of nat gas into clean.
No.
Type trade.
No. Because again, it's like, you think about the power stack, the grid, like they are constantly managing just the amount of supply and demand, and all of these different like producers are hooked up to the grid. Again, your nuclear is always running, your solar, your wind, it runs when it can. And it's like you're turning on and off different plants, the efficiency, like the heat ratio, like there's all this stuff that goes into it. But usually it is this price of natural gas that literally sets the price of electricity. So like, their profitability in theory should be set by the price of natural gas. And by the way, there's a lot of hedging that usually goes on here. So that's the other thing. Like, these companies like typically are not going to just be like, let's just.
No, they have the entire trading floors.
They're hedging the crap out of stuff. Like, they want to manage their risk. So you're usually not just going to be completely unhedged. I mean, I guess in theory, Lumi could be. And again, maybe this is like
Lumi
part
looks
of the
like
mismanagement.
Everyone's sitting on these like, spaceship beds working on their laptops. They're not exactly on a trading floor.
So anyway, this was probably way more than anybody really cared about, but I just was like, wait a second, this is like reversed. So the last thing is this guy Ashford, who, by the way,
so Ashford has this like gotcha moment, right?
This gotcha moment, and he says, therefore we disagree with PurePoint's price of $4.30. It should be closer to £4 a share. He says, we have doubts over the projected closing price of $4.80. So a couple of things here. Number one, when it comes to just setting the pricing with an IPO, it's not like, oh, you run your little model and you see what the price is and like, boom, like that's what we're going out at. No, it's based on supply and demand. It is based on literally the traders calling up the freaking different investors saying, how much of this do you want at what price? Sorry, they're building a book. They're literally saying this potential investor wants this many shares at this price point. They only want this many shares if the price goes up. So this is not like just an academic exercise where you have one bank that has set the price and that's going to be, this is
Yasmine
a price
and
discovery.
Robert and Kenny and Eric's job. This is
a price discovery thing. Initially, you might have the bankers in their initial conversations when they're doing the bake-off, trying to win the business, they'll run their valuations and be like, we can get you this. But then when like shit hits the fan, when like things get real, then you have research get brought over the wall. Research, who is supposed to be independent, like that's like a whole big thing. They're going to have their own little models and they're going to say, this is what we think. The research analysts talk to the investors, and the investors ultimately are the ones who are putting their money where their mouth is. Like this is not just like, ooh, PeerPoint came up with the price and then no, like this was a price discovery process. The other quick thing is that when you are talking about how the IPO is priced, it is interesting. He says 430 versus 480. Usually it is true that when you're going out and doing the IPO, you do price it at like a 15% discount. It's called the IPO discount because you do want to have like a pop. In this case, it's only like a 10% discount, but like the 430 would be based on say like a 480 valuation, so that in theory the company's equity will trade up.
And the mechanics of it trading up should be that you theoretically have a book that is so oversubscribed, meaning if you're selling 100 shares, you have $200 worth of orders, right? So that when you don't get allocated your fill at the IPO, you're scrambling to buy them in the open market, and that's what drives the price up in that initial trade up, in the initial hours after it's done.
Yeah. So Henry then says, James, let's drill down to the crux here. You know, the fundamentals are strong. And James says, Henry, I'm going to be reasonable. I'm going to offer you back half my equity at $430 a share per the PeerPoint valuation. This is, again, back to this whole thing. He invested like in the friends and family round. He's not guaranteed to sell out. And also like, what? Like, so I was I'm so confused.
To be honest, again, without knowing the whole history here, right? We don't
know this made up company.
We have this made up company and these made up people. If James Ashford, who runs a huge asset management firm, so big that he has institutional sales coverage at PeerPoint, but he invested in the friends and family round, right? So like we're talking a check size of like maybe $50,000 or $100,000. This is like what I had assumed, but obviously not. Let's say it's even a couple $1 million, right? There is a world in which he maybe signed some kind of like first in, first out scenario where like, hey, the second you have an exit, I want everything out at the most favorable economics conceivable. Who knows what the agreement was between the two of them? But I just found the idea that this is this like shocking thing that he could do, threatening to pull his money before the IPO, laughable, given they've established that his size is so insignificant. Like, which is it?
Yeah. But also
it's
like that,
like
this also just doesn't make any sense.
We're out the day before the IPO.
But that doesn't even make sense. Again, how is Sequoia getting out? Via the IPO.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. That makes no sense. Like even if Sequoia was upset about their investment and they think it's going, it's a zero. By the way, they shouldn't have invested in the first place, but like
also,
fine.
What recourse do they have?
They don't. That's why this is also I was annoyed by this. Yes.
We just don't know, right? Like we don't know if there's like some term that they have here, but they would have had to, the point is they would have had to have a special term in the investment of like, I have a put option to you the day of the IPO if I don't like how things are going, right? Like,
which is not a normal thing.
No, that's not a normal term.
No.
So like this wouldn't happen. Now, it would be much more realistic potentially if Ashford had an order in to increase his size, right? To buy more shares in the IPO. And then he pulled that out. Decided to back out and said, you know what? I don't want it. And the book goes from being oversubscribed by 20% to now, oh shit, he was 22% of the book. Now we only have 98% filled. Something like that would be much more realistic is what I'm understanding.
Yeah. So Yas then pipes in. She's trying to like save the day. She's like, here's PurePoint. Like Lumi is at the forefront of this energy solar revolution, like we talked about. And Yas says, well, from our perspective on the floor, it is oversubscribed and investors are very eager to buy. And he says, the market won't support it for long. You know, I truly hate how you sell side guys speak. It's fucking smoke and mirrors with you guys. Just jargon, tarting it up. And of course, you're incentivized to drive the price up. Your private equity division is invested in it. So are you.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you are on the same side as the private equity division. Like, hate to spoil that for you.
You are a private equity investor who has given this company your money. You want it to go well. Why are you trying to tank this? If he's so concerned, what would you do? If you were actually this investor, what should you do? Should you be like, let's punt the IPO, let's delay it, let's clean up these financials, let's see what's going on?
I think that if he is worried about possible wrongdoing by the company, I think that's a very valid thing. But this whole, my offer is $430 for half the equity. We'll see what happens the other half tomorrow. This is back to the thing. Does he have a put with them? Yeah. I do not understand this. And actually, I'm going to come back to that thing of you only care about the first couple of days. That's not necessarily true, but I'm going to come back to that. Henry says, you can have it all back at $430. So now he's basically offering to buy the whole thing back, which is, again, crazy. I keep hearing evangelizing on the phone, that belief, that one is why I feel we should let the market decide how valuable we are. So referring to Yasmine. So like, he's actually almost like happy with Yasmine for sticking up for him.
He's like, because Yasmine is just blowing smoke up the company's ass. She doesn't actually believe in Lumi. She's just saying, like, to Ashford's point, she's saying what she's supposed to say as someone who wants this. Again, everyone has the exact same alignment of interest. They all want this to be a successful IPO. And she's just like using the company jargon. And Henry is like, she believes in me.
Yeah. So Ashford then says, all of it? Good. You got yourself a deal. And he says, you know, Henry, I always wanted to be wrong about you. You know what comes after hubris? And then he walks out and Henry just sips his tea as Robert comes
Henry
off the
suddenly
phone.
Looks like, oh my God, what have I just done? And by the way, hubris is this like epic level of pride. It reminds me, we all know the phrase like pride goeth before a fall. But I also can't help remembering Jesse Bloom talking about Icarus flying too close to the sun. So we saw how that went with Harper's pride in the last episode, and we have not seen Harper yet this episode. We do not know where she is yet. We know that she has probably had a fall from grace because she isn't here. And so he's telling us that something is not going to go well.
Right. And so then over at PurePoint, Yaz says, did I just fuck that? Sweet Pea says he raised pretty big red flags, didn't he? And Kenny says, I'm sure that PurePoint bankers have done their due diligence to make sure this trades well on day one. Sweet Pea says, yeah, but like day 2 and day 200. So a couple other things. Now, number one, when the company does the IPO, there is this little thing called a green shoe, which allows the bank to stabilize the share price for the first couple of weeks. So again, there's usually going to be, I won't get into this too much. You can go listen to our IPO 101 episode, but long story short, the bank basically sells like 15% more of the IPO, and then they have to go back in the market to buy back that 15%, which can put upward pressure on the stock price if they need it. So that's sort of number one. So they do have, again, that stabilizing ability for the first couple of weeks. But number two, actually, a lot of times the companies like do really care what happens. Maybe not on day 200. They do care about day 180 because a lot of the insiders will have what's called lockups. So they will sign something, and it's usually with the bank, but like they'll have to basically say that, again, if you're an insider or you're an early investor, you can't sell out in the first 180 days. And then usually 180 days from the IPO, there will be something called like a secondary or follow-on offering where they will actually go out and they will help sort of formally liquidate more of the existing investors. So like the investors in the company do care what happens 180 days later.
And this idea too, they are not IPOing the entire company. It's not
exactly
gone, right?
Yeah.
This is their acquisition currency. This is what's going to determine their financial health long-term and their ability to do things. So even if Muck is looting the company for personal gain, he can only stand to gain so much. He typically is not just like gone forever. He probably still has some financial stake in this company. And it's very clear that he isn't going anywhere, that he intends to continue to be the CEO after it has gone public. Yasmine's desk doesn't care in the sense that they don't have an ongoing financial stake, but they have a reputational stake. And so I remember being at Morgan Stanley when we did the Facebook IPO, and it was supposed to be like this big feather in the cap of these banks. And it like went terribly. And it's like
such a disaster.
It was a disaster. It's like if you're a real estate agent and you land the big listing, if you misprice it and it sits on the market for 180 days, that's your reputation as a real estate agent. You have your name on that sign right in front of that property that's sitting on the market and doesn't go well, and it then sells for 10, 20, 30% under asking price. So even if they don't have an ongoing direct financial stake in Lumi's health long-term, everyone's interests are 100% one-way aligned on this going well, trading well in the follow. And when they do future IPOs, you want them coming at you. Like, everyone is aligned.
And they said that. They were like, this is the first in a whole bunch of IPOs that are in this space. So like, if you don't prove yourself with this IPO, you're not getting the fees on the subsequent ones.
Totally.
So,
I forgot about their whole freaking pipeline. That
their
this is
whole
allegedly
green
the
pipeline.
first domino in the stack up.
Yes,
So we're sitting
which
here
they
talking
keep saying.
philosophically. They hit you over the head with this in the show. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So anyway, I hate saying this is not 100% accurate because I freaking love the writers and I love the show. And in fairness to them, I remember when we were first starting to, and you were so like, I need to explain these things exactly as they work. And I was like, Jen, we have to simplify little things, even if it's like maybe a little bit inaccurate. And so I do think that these people, their goal is not to be as accurate as possible. It's to tell a good story, which they clearly succeeded because everyone loved this season. So I will waive any issues, but I do like pointing out where the things are
No,
maybe
that's
not right,
fabulous, Kristen. You're 100% right. A little bit of creative license goes a long way. And this would be a very boring episode if it was like, your cash balances seem a little overinflated. And they were like, you're right, let's correct that.
Yeah, seriously.
And scenes.
Yep. But what this is setting up, because he is selling with this put option he has, Lumi has to basically come up with the cash to buy more of his shares. Yasna says, surely it's bad to risk more shares in the open market if there's any kind of noise about Lumi diddling with the numbers so late. Kenny says, I'll tell Eric we handled it. But now we know that the stakes are even higher and there's potentially some sketchiness going on at Lumi.
Yeah.
So next scene.
Kenny tells Eric what just happened, right? So Kenny runs this up the chain, right? And
he tries to paint Yaz as having done an amazing job because he's still trying to like keep her in the good graces with Eric.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so we get Rishi off camera at this point with like his only other line of the episode, basically saying like, why are you a pituitary gland? And that other guy says, because I can make a hormone. Get it? So
I just understood that.
Yeah.
I missed that before.
Yeah, there we go. And so Eric, after learning from Kenny what has gone down, tells Yasmine explicitly to basically keep a lid on things and sell the story to do her job. And she says, well, isn't Ashford kind of being the canary in the coal mine? And Eric says, I'd wager our bankers and the Lumi CEO know better than Ashford. But if it makes you feel any better, this business is people making money on a hill of dead yellow birds. So basically, ignore whatever signals you're getting from this, ignore the noise. And then he says, what do you want from this job? And it's interesting because we think back to Harper in those very early interviews, or Gus, or everyone talking about like why they wanted the job in the first place. And Yasmine says, I want to prove to you that I belong here, which I think is the wrong answer. That frankly, like on a trading floor, like if that's an interview, like I want to prove to you that I belong here, I'd be like, well, you don't have to prove anything to me. I don't know who you are. Like, what are you going to do for me? How are you going to make money for the firm? Like, what is your bigger contribution to the desk as a whole? And Eric says, I need a functional member of a functioning team. I need a worker. And Yasmine says, I am a worker. And Eric says, I had a wrecking ball in that seat. I will just as quickly fire another one. Meaning Harper, right? Harper was that wrecking ball in the seat. Yasmine has shown him nothing as far as her qualifications to even compare her. And he's saying, like, I fired her. You think I won't fire you having contributed nothing, right? You are not a wrecking ball. And so it seems like he really misses Harper and misses her problem-solving capabilities, as morally questionable as they were, because if this were Harper, Harper would already have a plan. Harper would be like, here's the play. And so this is a perfect segue to now cut to Harper. And in the great dramatic tradition of main characters who get a haircut, going back to Felicity back in the day, Harper has a serious haircut. And I always think, like, again, when a character has a big appearance change, you're supposed to think like, why, right? And to me, this is showing the clean break that she has had And we see her, and what is she doing? She's sitting at her desk and she's texting some guy named Dave. And it kind of looks like this guy Dave wants to make plans with her. Harper sends him a picture of her that she says, I have just taken this at the office, of her with her hand in her pants.
Oh, is that what that was? I was like, what is this a picture of?
That's what that's a picture
confused.
of. Correct. And by the way, she's selecting from many of them on her little photo reel.
I was like, she sends him a non-sexual photo.
No, she sends him a very sexual photo. And so we get this off-camera dialogue in the background with women, right? So we are seeing women and we are getting off-camera dialogue. And it is such a great counterpoint to the off-color joke we just had Rishi make about the hormone. We get woman A saying she should definitely marry him. She's not got liquidity to freeze her eggs, which is a whole other conversation, by the way, because actually this was filmed at a time where so many firms now on Wall Street are offering, as part of your benefits, like actual cash towards egg freezing and towards surrogacy and things like that as part of your benefit plan to try to get women and people who are thinking about starting a family to stay in the industry longer. It's been pitched to our generation as like, just freeze your eggs. Like, don't worry about it. Just freeze your eggs. You can do whatever you want. It's not that simple, we're learning.
Well, yeah, I think there's two parts to it. And I actually get a little bit angry with some of the fear mongering around age and having kids, because I do think freezing eggs, especially for people where it's like your company's not paying for it, I think it's very predatory. Now I'm sitting here saying this as a 41-year-old about to have a baby. And I want to be very clear. I know that it is so hard for so many people, but it's interesting that like, if you actually look at the data, the fall off in decline is not the way that it's been pitched. Like the way I think people think, oh my God,
fertility with
yeah. It's like you turn 35 and like, oh my God, you can't have kids. Yeah. I remember when I was pregnant with my second and it was like, I'm advanced maternal age. I'm geriatric at 35. And I was like, what the fuck? And even with this pregnancy, I went in and I was seeing my doctor and I was like, oh my God, I'm so old now. I'm 40. And my doctor was like, no, calm down. But there is the reality that there is a decline. But I do think that there has been just so much fear stoking about how extreme it is. But the other aspect is then people who are making money off of these services like freezing your eggs, which by the way, they don't have great track records. Right. Now freezing embryos does, but like, I think that the combination of the fear mongering for women who, again, in like the New Yorks, in the Californias, blah, 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 to literally sit there and be like, oh, you're fine. Just freeze your eggs. Like you probably would have a better success just like trying to get pregnant, like
but also
the normal
being sold
way.
A false bill of goods, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you get to a certain point in your career and you're worried about it, just freeze your eggs then. And it's like actually the highest success rates, to your point, are frozen embryos, right? And the whole point is for a lot of these women, it's like, well, I want an insurance policy. I don't have a partner with who, you know what I'm saying? I'm not ready to take this step, like whatever. But also a lot of women are being told to do this in their like 30s, where the success rate of freezing your eggs is also orders of magnitude lower than freezing your eggs when you're like an infant, when you're like 20 or something, when you don't have the benefits package, likely when you don't have the funds to maintain.
Then you have to pay to store them.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so I think this is part of like a broader conversation that I'm just so sympathetic to women who are, I am not having any more children. Like this is just not part of my life or reality. It's just not something I think about very often, but even just hearing these conversations, you should go ahead and marry the guy because you don't have the funds to freeze your eggs. Like it also just shows that the women, even though this is a female specific conversation, the women are just as cold and just as vicious towards each other as the men are. It's just a different conversation. So I think that's really interesting. 100%. We also get this amazing scene then after this off-camera dialogue. I mean, truly one of my favorite scenes. We get a female coworker who comes up to Harper, like smiling and says, I have spied you putting your disposable coffee cup in the general waste. And Harper, smiling and laughing, but we know Harper, if she could, would literally leap up from her desk and like stab this woman in the neck with a pen. But she says, oh yeah, I'm so sorry, like with the liquid in it, I like never sure if it qualifies. And this woman, completely with a straight face, says, so if the receptacle is sullied, you just clean it out and then you pop it in the paper recycling. It's 5 seconds out of your day and you might just even feel good. Anyone watching the show is like cringing, right? You're like, this is so freaking painful. But Harper is just smiling and taking it and laughing. And she's like, oh no, that's totally rational. Like, and like, I seriously am waiting for her to like snap.
Murder.
Right? But we see how far Harper has fallen, that she is being chided, not about going the wrong way on a trade, not about lying to a client, not about doing insider trading, but about how she is literally taking out the trash. It is such a fall from grace. We now get off-camera chatter as well about the Lumi deal. We hear someone saying, how does Lumi feel on the sales side? Between us, I think this one really needs to hit for us from a bright side perspective. Feels like it's a tone setting. The phone then rings and Harper picks it up and says, Future Dawn, Anna Gearing's office. And now we know where she is and what she's doing. She is the assistant to Anna Gearing, who is from season 2, I want to say. Yeah. From season 2, Yasmine's client, who is running this ESG fund. And in fact, it is Yasmine calling. And Harper expresses her sympathies, by the way, for what happened with the paparazzi last night, which feels like ancient history. Yasmine is super stressed, but like it's very clear that they are friendly. Harper seems totally defanged, but in her private communications where we see her just like sending these texts back and forth to this guy, like we know that Harper is still our Harper deep inside. Yasmine is super stressed out and she's like, I just want to talk to Anna. Okay. We see Harper getting a text from this guy, Dave, being like, cool photo. Like, thanks for sending me this. Should I cancel my movie account or not? Like, whatever. So Harper stands up and looks over at Anna's office and sees that she's in with someone who will learn her name is Petra. And Harper asks Yasmine what she's calling about. Like, basically, she's in a meeting, like, can't take a message. And Yasmine says it's about the Lumi deal. She says she has some more Lumi stock if Anna would like to add. Harper, because she's still our girl Harper, and because she is, of course, the better salesperson than Yasmine is, says, are you trying to dump more on her? Because maybe you should change your tone, okay? Yeah. And Yasmine's like super annoyed. And Harper's not actually intervening on behalf of the fund, being like, don't try to dump more stock on us. That's the wrong financial move for us as the buyer. Yeah. She's more just like, listen, if you want her to buy what you're selling, you better like change your pitch. You're not convincing anyone. So we see that Harper still has that. She hasn't lost that edge, right? Yeah. Yeah. And that Yasmine still sucks. So Harper goes in to go talk to Petra and Anna. And we catch the conversation where Anna is saying, Future Dawn isn't a vanity project for your trading book. Petra says, I signed a contract to work for you under the proviso that I have autonomy. I want to place my own trades without an autopsy on every single one. I don't do well with micromanagement. Anna says, this is the company-wide strategy. All of your trades are hedges that cap Future Dawn's upside. Petra said, this is about being clear-eyed. My book is the only one that's outperforming. I've been keeping us afloat since the move from Berlin, and you know that. So we know that they've now moved into the UK, which is like number one. But it's interesting because like you also see that here's this woman, Petra, who she's literally turns to Harper and says, do you think ethical investment actually works? Or is it just a palliative we give ourselves to feel better? And Anna asked, like, why are you asking her that? But it's very clear that Petra is here. And Petra is very likely buying into non-ESG investments. So that's why she's saying that like all your trades are hedges that cap their upside. When she's like, no, actually all of your dumb ESG investments are basically like keeping us down. And the only reason that we're performing is I'm investing in the non-ESG stuff. But also the idea that Anna's like, how dare you even ask this question in this place? Because not only is that Anna, but that's kind of what the broader cultural mood was like, how dare you suggest that this isn't wonderful, right? Well, but it's so funny too, because at the end of the day, like the money is what keeps score. It's like, do you make money or do you not make money? And it's like when you're so dogmatic about this one thing and you're not even willing to entertain that maybe this isn't the right trade anymore. I mean, that is obviously a problem. And well, but it's a problem for her as a manager, but it's a problem for the entire cultural movement, right? That it was like cultish, right? That it was like, how dare you ever say that something that is green isn't wonderful? Yeah. And you saw that with even Eric when that guy said that and he was like, excuse me? And by the way, Eric, who of all the people doesn't believe it all, but it was like, oh my God, I can't believe you're saying this out loud. So Harper is almost like, don't shoot. Like, I'm just, this she said, I just like, do the diary. And diary means calendar. So she's just Anna's like administrative assistant. But she says, I agree with Anna that impact investing is the foundational ethos of this company. And Petra sees right through her and she's like, I don't think anyone's thinking for themselves around here anymore, and walks out. But so we know that Harper doesn't have any sacred cows. Harper doesn't have any deeply held beliefs. Harper just wants a job.
Well, she does, but she also knows I need this job, so I need to be saying the right thing so that I have a job tomorrow.
I think Harper has feelings about what makes money. I don't think that she
has
any deeply held moral code that
yeah. But what drives her is like, what's going to make money.
Yes.
But she also is smart. Like she knows, like, I've got to say the right things that I'm still here.
She can't disagree with Anna to her face.
Harper tells Anna that Pierpoint's on the line and it's Yaz calling to ask if she wants any more Lumi stock. And Anna picks it up to talk to Yaz. She says, the only reason you call me this close to the IPO is because someone is dumping. Anna says, you know how invested we are in the Lumi listing. We, meaning Future Dawn. Don't freak me out. Is there something I should know? And then Yaz just hangs up the phone, which is like, holy shit.
She blew the sales pitch. The one line that she said to Anna totally freaked Anna out. But she has no response.
Yes, but then Harper asked Anna, how much of the fund is in Lumi? So this goes back to the same thing that we were talking about before with James Ashford. This is supposed to be an exit, but the fact that Future Dawn is buying in, like, why not just do a further funding round?
Was Future Dawn an early investor, or does Future Dawn have an order in, like a massive order in for more of the stock, or both?
They had to have been an early investor because they said that this has to hit, basically. So I assume that they have an investment already. Because again, like why
they're adding in the IPO or they're exiting?
Yes. No, well, no, they're not exiting. Mm-hmm. That's why Yaz is here trying to get her to buy more of the stock.
But again, I'm confused. If they are selling out of their investment, why are they buying more in the IPO?
But this is what I'm saying. This all is confusing. That's why I was annoyed by this plot point, because the early investors who were in like the VC early rounds are also somehow the investors who are like buying in at the IPO.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Yes, agreed.
So anyway, Anna ignores the question from Harper about how much of the fund are they invested in Lumi. And she is then very focused on like the minutia. She's sort of like, finding things to talk about. She's like, oh my God, like I need my diary. Make sure it's printed out for tomorrow. I need to hold it, like blah, blah, blah. And Harper makes a joke. She says double-sided for the environment. And Anna's just like, huh? And she was like, sorry, that was a joke, right?
Well, here's Anna, the ESG founder, who wants her calendar printed out so that she can hold it in her hand, which is an absurd request. And again, the least ESG friendly thing conceivable, right? Like who prints anymore? And so it's just so funny that it's showing that Anna is actually just as hypocritical. Yeah. She's not living and breathing the ESG that she allegedly so devoutly believes in.
100%. And then she asked if Harper will move her car in an hour. So we see like how far Harper has fallen. She now is the car mover.
But we do see the wheels turning in Harper's mind. And yes, she's been put in her place, but we know she's not going to be there for long.
Right. So next scene is Yaz stapling curtains to try to block the paparazzi. And she gets a call from someone with no ID. So she answers it very hostilely, and it's Henry Muck. And he tells her that Rob gave him her number and asks if she will join him later tonight near Green Park. And so she's not thrilled about the fact that, like, again, he now has her personal cell phone number. So next scene, Harper's still in the office. The lights are going off. And like, this is such a thing where it's like the lights just go off. So she's like waving her hands to try to get the lights back on.
Well, I think that scene is symbolic in and of itself. That was something that a lot of companies implemented, like from a green perspective, that you have these lights on sensors that they go off when there's no one in the office, because it used to be that these office buildings would just be lit up all night, every night. But also it actually reminded me of this not a real person, like the NARPy conversation. The sensors don't think anyone's left on the floor. Harper has fallen so far that it's symbolic that she's no longer a person. She's not even setting off the sensors. She doesn't register on the radar as an administrative assistant. She just has no
that's
power.
Such a good point. Yeah. So anyway, so she's waving her arms, and then Anna walks in, which does get the lights to turn on. And she asks if Harper moved the car, and Harper realizes that she forgot.
By the way,
and
so
Anna
what has Harper been doing all day that she was so busy she forgot to do the one
seriously,
task? Just
the
like
one thing.
Sexting her weird boyfriend.
So Anna says, it's okay. I knew you'd forget. It seems to be a trend with you. And then she says, you do realize that exhibiting total incompetence won't expedite your move to trading. So we now also know that she basically has been promised if she can do this job of assistant, like she might actually get to work on the buy side, like to actually like be an investor.
To have a real role and control some money. But we know that's not how Harper rolls, right? Harper's not going to just like put her head down and do this demeaning work. She is going to leapfrog at any available opportunity.
Which is exactly what she does. So she then walks into Petra's office and tells her ESG is a fad. Ethical investing is a fad. Everybody and their snotty brother claim to be ESG. Assets that qualify are so bid, the valuations are making them stupid investments now anyway. Not to mention the macro headwinds, the election, lack of clear-sighted investment in fossil fuels. Really, it's like a utopian opiate for morons who believe in a better world, whatever the fuck that means. And Lumi, do you really believe in cheap green energy for the masses exists, or is someone spinning a story? Now, by the way, yes, it exists. It's called nuclear, but that's a different story.
This conversation as they're walking to the elevator. Yep. And as they step into the elevator, the doors are already open and Anna is in there. So it's unclear at this point how much of this conversation Anna has or hadn't heard, but she sees Harper and Petra together, which makes her all of a sudden change her tone. Anna apologizes and says, my cortisol levels are so high, which is just like Jon Snow with his keto stuff. This seriously sounds like something being like peddled on TikTok. Like, oh, you're not fat, you just have high cortisol levels.
Yeah, she says that she doesn't want the people who work for her to feel like employees, and Harper's like, but we are your employees. Yeah. And then she says, I really appreciate that you were willing to take a chance on me. In the spirit of honesty, I'd love to have a dialogue about the firm's investment choices just to keep my brain alive. And Anna says, it's been a really long day. We'll talk first thing in the morning. The lights then turn off and then she's there like waving her arms. Now in the next scene, we kind of like get a feel of who's living with who. So it does seem like Yaz, Robert, and Harper are all living together, and then Manisha's there as well. And so
they have this like weird friends apartment, right? It's like the friends apartment in the Upside Down where like everything is terrible and gloomy. It's not purple. It's not cute. Nobody's happy to see anyone.
Right. So Yaz is in her apartment. Renisha and Robert walk in, and Yaz is pissed at Robert for giving her phone number to Henry. And Robert says, it was just your work phone. It's work. And Yaz says, no, he called my personal number. And Robert says, Yaz, I promise I would never give him your personal number. And Yaz tells him that he wants to meet tonight. And then Harper comes in with this guy, Dave, who clearly is like the biggest douchebag. And he makes a comment, nothing more bleak than a financial flat share. Another day at the coalface, eh? Privatizing profits and mutualizing losses. And the other roommates all look at him like, who the fuck is this dude?
Totally.
They know him. They say, hi, Dave. But they're like, this guy sucks. And
also, it's like, we talk about this, like only when you're part of a family can you make fun of that other family. If you're not in finance, you can't joke about like another day at the salt mines.
Yeah.
Like you have to earn that right to joke about the industry.
I did find it very bizarre that Harper was dating someone like that. Like I just don't see her putting up with that type of thing. So this was
she clearly
shocking.
Has no connection to this guy, right? I feel like this was
but the friends like know who this is.
Oh, I mean, he's been a repeat offender, clearly. Like that she has this text chain with him that he's talking about like binge watching a show together. But I think that this is just like Harper anesthetizing herself.
So anyway, Harper comes over and like almost like cradles Yaz's face and says, are you okay? So it's very clear that they have like a very loving, almost like friendship at this point. And Harper is like, look, the press are animals, ignore them, move on. And Yaz then has this flashback of her father standing over her naked, choking her. And it's a flash, but it's like I saw way too much in that I didn't want to see. And then she looks at Harper and kind of nods. Harper then says, good night, I'll be in my room, continuing to make poor decisions. And then Robert says to Yaz, I'm sure Henry's being innocent. Are you going to go? And Yaz says, I don't really have a choice, do I? I'm waiting for a car. And Robert's like, there's a Tesla outside now. So
of course it's a Tesla.
Oh, of course. So Yaz is again, she's so angry at Robert. She says, you passed your managerial role on to me because you don't know how to do your fucking job. And Robert then apologizes. And Yaz says, you know how exposed I am right now. An unknown number gives me a fucking heart attack. And I'm about to lose my job over a fucking photograph I didn't even know was taking. Can you just try to understand that? But again, like Robert didn't do anything in this case. I understand her being upset, but like.
She always takes it out on Robert.
Yes. So then the next scene is where she goes to meet Muck at this like elite club. And so she walks through, like I said, some like fancy private club and then walks into the basement in a room where it looks like Henry is playing almost like squash or I don't know what game it is.
I heard the thwacking, so I thought it was going to be squash, but it's like handball.
Okay, so he's playing handball with these two older guys. And so Henry yells at her. He says, are we oversubscribed? And she says, there's a very exciting amount of appetite. I really think that Ashford's bearishness was local to him. Then someone named Otto says, how's Aurora? Is she electable yet? So I think she's being groomed for like prime minister type thing.
Yeah.
So Someone else says then, get her on one of those Sunday shows to do a profile. And Henry says, Yasmine, this is my uncle, Lord Norton, and my godfather, Otto Mostyn. But they're setting up that he's very well connected. That's why I was saying like the muckety muck, because like he actually has these connections in high places. And so Lord Norton looks at Yaz and says, where do I know you from? Yaz says, I work at Pierpoint. Nada replies, Pierpoint. My God, is that place even still solvent? And so Henry then says they've actually done a very good job marketing Lumi. And Otto asks how it's shaking up. And Henry replies, £4.80. So Otto then says something in Italian, which is actually the title of the episode. Yaz repeats it back. And she says, the morning has gold in its mouth. But this is where that whole thing comes about. I guess it's related to the IPO. And
well, I think, yeah. So whenever you say the line that is the title of the show, you're supposed to pay attention, right?
Yes.
And so why are we supposed to pay attention to a phrase that means the early bird gets the worm? It could just be a sincere reference to what buying in an IPO is supposed to be. When you purchase in an IPO, you're supposed to be getting something at a discount that's then going to trade up. You were early on the trade, you benefit, right? But I think the fact that this guy is saying it in also this like Italian phrase or whatever, I feel like he's saying it here in jest. I think he's mocking the entire thing that like, oh, the early bird gets the worm, huh? More like the early bird is fucked. That's how I took it, as part of the broader theme of many a true thing said in jest, that being early on this isn't good for anyone.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So Lord Norton then says to Otto, that's Charlie's kid. He then turns to Yaz and says, I was at Balliol, which is a college at Oxford, with your father. Otto says, oh my God, Charlie Hanai, dangerously handsome, dangerously stupid. I admired him. Then Lord Alexander, so like the Norton dude, says to Yaz, sorry about my newspaper coverage. So it's clear that he owns this newspaper that's been printing all this shit about her, right? The tabloids. He says, I empower my editors, not my decision, but a lot of people are very angry with Mr. Hanai. I gently nudge him to come out of hiding and stop letting his daughter take the punishment. Otto pipes in, says, scuttling away from his boat in a dinghy, which is like the little floaty boat that goes behind the big yacht. So he says, scuttling away from his own boat in a dinghy, it's a coward's way out. And then Yaz says, well, if that's everything, because she's like, get me the fuck out of here. And Henry walks over to Yaz and says, thank you for the hands-on service. Let's keep this dialogue going, shall we? And then he adds, I know what it's like having a family member ruin your life. So I know what you're going through. The kids are always collateral. Off camera, we then hear Otto saying, I wonder if Charlie's recovering from syphilis he got at some Mediterranean whorehouse. And then Otto runs after Yaz saying, I'm having lunch tomorrow at the club with Gregory Clark from British Electric. He says Gregory is looking for a Lumi comp to buy, given he missed out on Prince Hall's little project. So again, Hall, nickname for Henry. And Yaz says, you should really speak with the investment banking division about that kind of deal making. Otto says, you know, your father owes a lot of people a lot of money, including but not limited to his bill at our club. So stop by as his proxy. And then Yaz walks out. She is just so pissed off at everything. Her life is just crumbling before her eyes.
But I do not understand. He is looking at her like there's some kind of meaning to be understood here. Your dad has unpaid bills at my club. So I assume he's trying to suggest that she is responsible for making up that debt. And to fulfill that debt, she is going to be part of finding a deal for some guy at British Electric or whatever. I don't understand what he's asking her to do.
I don't remember what comes from that. I think what it is it's starting to set up that she is basically the one who is being held responsible for her father's misdeeds.
Well, we know that. The press is holding her responsible. Pierpoint's holding her responsible. This guy, but
yeah, but even more so than like just the sort of moral responsibility, more of the financial responsibility. Out
in 5 minutes.
Yes, in this next scene. But I think that this is part of this whole thing of like, essentially her father runs off, has done something wrong. She was not a party to it, but she's now the one who was being left holding the bag, and they're coming after her. And from like all these different angles. I think that that's what it is.
They're clearly setting up a big plot point with this character. I don't get it. So if anyone in here understood this immediately, like what his meaning was, I'd love it. I'm excited to see
I don't think you're supposed to, again, given that I don't even know what it is and I've seen the whole freaking season. Okay. But I also maybe like missed a big plot point, which is not completely out of the realm of possibilities. So the next scene, this is just absolutely batshit. So
I loved this part.
So Yaz is talking to this blonde woman at a bar, and she's saying, I have to do something with this article. Surely we can sue. The other woman says, it's not going to stay in the news for long, and everyone loses in a libel case except the lawyers. So the
Maybe think of Amber Heard and Johnny Depp.
Yeah, but also I've heard that the UK tabloids are even more ruthless than even in the US. So Yasmin says the thing is that this photo was taken completely out of context. It looks like I was partying on stolen money. And the other woman says, so wait, what are the financial implications for you? I mean, your family wasn't even involved in Hanani Publishing anymore, were they? Yas says no, but it's a historical embezzlement. He was skimming off the pension pot for years. Some of the employees are actually trying to sue me directly. And the woman says, but surely they haven't got a case against you while he's still missing. And Yas says, no, but it's still costing me a fuck ton in lawyers. If only the press knew that I was broke. So she then is like, oh shit. Like she looks up and she sees Eric, who is, by the way, who also spots her. And she's like, oh my God, oh my God. And she's like, she's there on a date with someone who is not his wife. And so he walks over and she's like, I'm not on the piss. I'm just meeting with a lawyer. And the woman says, and she used to fuck my brother. So I don't know what that has to do with.
Is this Maxim's sister? Like, that's what I was trying to figure out who this woman is.
That must be it. Because I was
but
like,
she's a lawyer and she's asking Yasmine what the financial implications of all this are. So,
and
like,
she
you're
looks
the worst
nothing
lawyer
like Maxim.
of all time. No.
And she looks nothing like Maxim at all.
No.
But also that would make sense. So anyway, Eric says, well, I'm on a date. I am separated from my wife. Just wanted to get ahead of that, right? The lawyer then asks him, she's like, ooh, so how's it going? So now she's interested in Eric. And Eric says, she keeps talking about her kids. One's transitioning, not my area. The lawyer says, I fucking hate kids. So Eric says, one never hurt. Let me extricate myself from the situation with as much grace as I can sum up. And Yaz says to the woman, she's like, why the fuck did you do that? Now I can't leave. And the woman's like, I love an old dog with new appetites. So then this next scene, okay.
Well, very fitting because an old dog with new appetites, we now transition to
Robert and Benicia, who are clearly together, like they're asleep in bed, unclothed, but he then sneaks out and goes to visit Nicole. So he's dating Benicia, but he sneaks out to visit Nicole. They sleep together. And then we're back at the scene with Eric and Yaz, but you're like, what are you doing with Nicole?
Totally thought this plot line was over. Like,
nope.
Of all the plot lines I thought that were coming back this season, this was not the one. And again, so much time has passed. It's very clear now that we're on the order of magnitude of years, and this is still going on. But he's clearly in a long-term relationship with Benicia. They're de facto living together, and he's sneaking out in the middle of the night to go visit Nicole. Robert is so broken. I thought Robert was beyond broken last season. Like,
no. So then the next scene, we're back with Eric and Yaz and the lawyer. The lawyer invites everyone back to her house, and Yaz is like,
to her office.
To her office. You're right. But Yaz is like, we have a big day tomorrow. It's their freaking the IPO for Lumi. And Eric says, sure. And Yaz is like, oh, fuck it.
Well, she doesn't want to go. And Eric goes, oh, just when you were finally getting interesting. Yaz feels like the stakes are her job depends on Eric's approval. So she feels like she has to now stick around for this big night out.
Yes.
This is way back to Yaz from the beginning. Nothing has changed, but it's not Kenny anymore. Now it's Eric. And she's got to go along with whatever they're going to do because she wants to keep her job. I know this feeling. Yeah. I know this feeling so well of like, I want to go home. I just want to go to sleep. And it's like, oh, but the big boss is here. The big client's here. You can't go home now. I feel for her.
Well, and so then they go to this lawyer's office and the lawyer is preparing lines of coke. Yaz says, no, thanks. It's not who I am. Eric says, not what the newspapers imply. And then he's like, kidding. And he says he hasn't done blow since 9/11. Yaz is like, look, it's not who I am. Eric says me neither. And then Yaz is finally just like, yeah, I'm lying. This is what I'm good at. And so they both basically do coke together.
Yeah, it's so sad, right? This is not who I am. We think back to her trying to break away from her dad. And she crumbles under just like the slightest implication. I feel bad for her. I really do. I don't know why I empathize with her. I never did this. I wasn't doing coke in a barrister's office. But I feel for her so badly because I feel like she's tried everything in her mind to prove herself to Eric. And she's like, well, if this is what it takes, I'll happily do this. If this is what people think I am, I'm just going to play to that role. It sucks.
I don't like that they make Eric more human this season.
Well, I think I want to get to the end of the making Eric more human because my least favorite portrayal of him was that episode in New York where he was having the affair with his old boss's widow or whatever. And it rang the least true to me. It was the least nuanced. It was hitting you over the head. They hit you over the head with Eric's character in this in a way that also feels so unsubtle that I'm bothered by it.
So after Eric and Yasmine do some lines of coke together, we basically flash back to Robert at Nicole's. And I don't know why they wanted to write this in. I think it has to do with just almost like needing to show him breaking a little bit. But Robert says to her, I've bitten off more I can chew with this house. I'm broke. At least the lights are still on, or just about. So it sounds like he basically bought a house.
Which
and the
is
house
insane, by the way. Most people, again, working in finance in New York City, don't buy a home until they are either like very, very senior or ready to move out of the city. Most continue to rent for a very, very, very long time.
Although we bought.
You bought. I know.
We must have been 31. Most of our friends actually did buy, even in the city around that point. If they had been in finance and staying in New York City and not with plans to leave, it's like, okay, this is going to be an investment. Might as well put the money into the real estate market. Horrible decision, by the way, but that was just like bad timing on our part because we didn't obviously see COVID coming. But historically, it had been a good investment.
Interesting, because our friends who are older went through a wave of buying in like 2020 and thereon when they were all leaving the city. Those who stayed in the city, most of them didn't buy their places until like basically the mini crash. I guess for whatever reason, we have two different sample sets, but regardless, I do think Robert is still quite young and not having seemed particularly successful at all to be purchasing real estate, and has bought a place that seems pretty shitty within London, which is as expensive as, or in some ways potentially even more expensive than New York because mortgages are different. So leverage is a little bit less accessible. But Nicole's place is sick. Nicole has like a giant backyard. Like her place is insane.
Which, like, of course, she's a hedge fund manager. Yeah. So anyway, the main TLDR is that him and Nicole basically fall asleep together outside of her insane mansion.
Robert's arc in this first episode is boring and feels false to me. We broke this man down in the last season. He's a purely broken animal. I think in order to keep him on the show and keep his narrative going, they need to show him breaking again almost, because you might otherwise think that he's okay in this relationship with Venetia. They could have much more subtly had him be a damaged soul who perhaps crumbles under the pressure of being the one who's supposed to shepherd Muck through this IPO. He could crumble on this independently because he's a fundamentally broken person because of what happened to him in last season. To me, that would have felt much truer than the insane plot line that they then develop here to show him breaking so spectacularly and have this wildly overacted scene with Eric that then ensues, which we'll get to.
And then we flash back to Eric and Yaz. So this next scene, now Eric and Yaz are bonding. And
I love this scene. She's like wearing the barrister's wig and they're like talking to each other and they're like, oh, yeah, it's like two totally high people just being like, oh my God, I can see into your soul, you know? Like,
yeah. And so Eric asks Yaz, what's the deal with her and Kenny? Because Kenny has been such a strong advocate for her. And Yaz doesn't exactly understand what she's saying in her like high stupor. She thinks that he's asking about what happened in season 1. So he's like, how do you know about that? We've pushed past that. And Eric was like, oh, he pushed me hard on rehiring you. And then he starts to share that Kenny took Eric in, says, after my wife kicked me out, I lost 3 days to Jim Beam. I went to Kenny. He and his wife were very kind. It's like Robbie Williams turning up at Elton John's, like the patron saints of pissheads. And so as they're having this heart to heart and Eric is like kind of bearing his soul to her, this Denise lawyer woman in the background is just like,
she's like seducing Eric or whatever, and like he's in the most ridiculous way. But Eric says once he tells her this story of how Kenny took him in, he says, I shouldn't have shown him that side of myself.
Yeah.
But there's a finer point here that you make on the plot, because this little nugget now is planted about Kenny's wrongdoing with Yasmine that I don't think he had any idea about prior to this little cocaine-fueled tete-a-tete. So he's talking about this closeness with Kenny, but inadvertently, Yasmine hands him this weapon against Kenny that he can use. And we know that whenever there's wrongdoing, someone's going to use that as leverage.
Yep. So Yas then says to Eric, let me level with you. I'm terrified of you because I want to be seen by you. And Eric replies, I feel like we've just skipped several awkward stages of our relationship. She then calls him a rock star, and Eric is like, keep talking. I shouldn't need the validation. I just bailed on therapy. And in the background again, Denise continually is like, I don't know, like kind of getting naked. It's just, yeah. And Yaz admits that she's never done therapy. Eric says, a lot of money just to talk about your parents, and then adds, where is your father? Yaz says, I really wish people would stop asking me that. But I did think it was so funny. He's like, people talk about your parents. Like, Yaz has the most effing fucked up relationship with her parents of probably like anybody on the show. And so anyway, so then she says, what did you and Harper have that was so special? And Eric says, there was nothing special. You don't have to be anything like her. I'm baffled she got a job in the business. And Yaz then admits that it was basically her who twisted Anna's arm because Yaz had that relationship with Anna. We remember actually the first season, Harper needed Yaz to facilitate an introduction.
And then remember the meeting with Anna in Berlin where Yaz is hungover. Harper is reeling from her interaction with her brother, and Jackie comes in and saves the meeting. Yes. Yeah, exactly. And Jackie had to save that meeting. But I also think it's so interesting too. It's Harper chastising Yasmine for being bad at her job and pitching this Lumi stock to Anna. But remember, it was Yasmine's sales skill and her knowing Anna as a person, remembering her children's names and all that stuff that made her stand out earlier when Harper was just beating her over the head, being like, give me this info so I can sell it to Jesse. And so it's funny how it all comes kind of full circle, right? And now Yasmine is the crappy salesperson who's like, buy the Lumi stock. And Harper's like, it doesn't work that way.
But again, it is important to note that Yaz is the one that did this for Harper.
Yes.
Meanwhile, by the way, now Denise is doing headstands in the background. And Yasmin asks point blank, are you going to fire me? We can keep dancing around it, but it's on my mind. And Eric says, it hadn't crossed my mind before he's like, well, that's not entirely true.
Yeah.
He says, I have to let someone go. And Yaz asks who? Eric says, someone worth letting go, associate or above. I don't want to, but if I don't, they'll think I'm weak, which is such like you're playing with someone's life just because I don't want them to think I'm weak. It was very tragic, I guess. So Yaz says, right, but me and Robert are the only two associates. And he's made himself indispensable by managing Muck.
Disagree. Fire Robert.
I know. Eric says he's indispensable until the IPO launches.
Yeah.
And then he asks, why did you put in a good word for Harper? Yaz says, I think deep down she's a good person. Eric says, I don't think she is. Yaz then laughs and says, I can't believe we're doing this the morning of the IPO. They both laugh. Then Denise comes up and is actively sucking on his fingers. And then Eric is just sort of like, Yasmin, can you leave now?
So gross.
So disgusting. But yes.
It reminded me of the Summer House toe sucking fiasco.
Oh, God.
Jesse Solomon.
Jesse Solomon. Oh,
gross,
God.
gross. Anyways.
But I did like that when she asked what was so special with Harper. And he's just like, nothing. But that's so not true. But
and
whatever.
you know that he thinks that, given the way he talked about Harper when he was in the office as this wrecking ball, clearly. Yeah. And we're revisiting these themes of father-daughter relationships. It's almost for a second like Eric and Yasmin explore this father-daughter relationship in an equally fucked up way as the relationship that she has with her actual dad, where he's engaging in this like sexual behavior in front of her, which is inappropriate for a boss, but it's not something we haven't seen on Wall Street before. It harkens back to the beginning of the episode where Yasmin was forcibly subjected to it. Eric seems gracious by comparison to excuse her from it, because I thought where this was going was they were going to like have a threesome, and I was like, Yasmin, run away.
Yeah. Thank God, no.
You know, there was the threesome with Robert, and
that's true. Her and Harper.
There was the threesome with her and Harper. There was the relationship with Celeste. Like, I wouldn't put it past Yasmin. It'd be like, we're all just having fun. This is what we do at parties. We just randomly have threesomes with our coworkers.
I'm glad that
I'm really glad it didn't go that way.
Yes. Okay, so next scene, we're back at Nicole's, and Robert wakes up outside. It's raining, and he turns over and looks at Nicole, and she's dead. What the actual F? I just write WTF. So
that's why I'm saying this episode was like a horror
You're
movie.
Like, what is this?
There's dead bodies.
Yes. So anyways, he ends up calling the police. Someone comes to get her. And then he calls Yaz and says, do you think I'm cursed? It's just everyone dies. Because remember, his old mentor died as well.
And I think
I'm
his
blanking on his name,
mom died, right?
His mom died.
Yeah, his mom has passed away, and Nicole was like this proxy for his mom in his life.
But also then that other mentor, the drug addict, was the proxy almost like for his dad. Like was a dad-father stand-in.
Clement Cowan.
Yes, Clement Cowan.
Oh my God, I forgot about that entire plot line. But okay, Nicole's freaking dead. I am offended by this plot line.
She's like 50.
She's like 50. She was in the defense of older women. We tend to, knock on wood, just not drop dead from 1 second to the next.
No, anyway, so Yasmine says, yes, everyone dies. Are you fucked? What have you taken? Maybe you should stop drinking.
She always just assumes he's drunk and high.
I know.
This poor man who has tried to be sober from her, by the way, because she's the toxic thing. I'm sorry, I'm so angry about this. But like, why is she such a bitch to him unnecessarily? Like, it's always about her. And it's so funny because like to her, Harper always makes it about her. So it's like the same way that the DEI chip gets passed to everyone. It's like the selfishness accusation gets passed down the chain of seniority within this friend group from hell.
That's so true.
All the time.
So true.
You know?
So coming into this morning of this IPO, we have Eric and Yaz doing coke and like staying up really late. Now, obviously, Robert is wildly distraught because he just like woke up and his lover is dead. So now next scene, we are on the trading floor and Yaz walks in.
It's chaos, by the way. Like, phones are ringing. Like everyone looks like they're running around with their heads cut off. It's like the joke of what people represent a trading floor to be like papers flying.
Except for this is like, I mean, Eric's 2 kids are there. I mean, why are they not in school?
Okay, so we were just talking about this, how every single holiday, especially when you send your kids to private school, which we know that Eric does, they're in school for about 5 days a year. But it's this awful thing where I guess Eric's wife has showed up at the office with his children saying it was your day to take care of them because clearly they have like some kind of joint custody agreement or whatever, has pawned them off onto Sweet Pea, who is now babysitting them. And these poor little girls in their little dresses, this broke my heart. Maybe it's because I'm a mom. This makes me want to cry just thinking about these children becoming aware that their parents use them as pawns. The idea that a child would think that their parents don't want to spend time with them. That one turn for Eric's character to me.
Because he went from being this loving dad.
Even if he was secretly a shitty person, that facade hadn't cracked with his family yet, that the daughters were starting to suspect it. Because when he was home, remember, for that little like sabbatical period, but to have this confirmation laid bare that he is in fact a terrible father, like it was very harsh. It was much harsher for me than Nicole dying for whatever reason.
Oh, I agree with that. I also was just confused because I don't know how old his kids are, but you do tend to have like he has to go to work.
Well, I will say this, it happens all the time, especially around the holidays. You will hear little kids being like, hello, like over the hood because someone's child hair has fallen through and it's a disaster and they've had to bring them to the office for a couple of hours. This does happen.
I guess that's fair. So anyway, Sweet Pea asks as Yaz is walking in, she asks, where is Eric? Has anyone seen him? And Yaz is like, why would I know?
She's so offended. Like, she's like so defensive. You literally were out with him last night. No one suspects you of it. Calm down.
Seriously. So Eric walks onto the floor. His tie is undone. He looks completely disheveled. His girls say, you forgot about us, which is obviously awful. And he says, no, I didn't. Rishi then says, and I thought this was all interesting. So Rishi then says to Sweet Pea, you sure you want to let his kids see those heels? They'll be destined for life in the pole, implying that her wearing these shoes will set up these random children to be a stripper for whatever. Sweet Pea then retorts because she like, I like that she has the ball. She's like, fuck you. Says, Rishi, don't shame me for dressing me in a way that gives me confidence and then look at me like I'm lunch. It's completely inappropriate.
This goes back to season 1. Remember, Kenny drew that heel height relative to job pay, and it was like nurses and strippers, that graph.
Yeah.
So Rishi is bringing back that same crudeness, and Sweet Pea says to him what sounds like the party line of like, I dress in a way that gives me confidence. Don't you slut shame me for it. But she looks at Rishi and gives him a big heart like this. So she can give it as good as she gets it. She is totally in on the joke. And she will weaponize the language of female empowerment as long as it serves her. She doesn't give 2 shits. I love this woman.
But that's the whole thing. It's like, okay.
But there was like the shaming and people feeling shame. Then there was like the shaming people for shaming, which is what she's saying here at face value. But then there is the third level of using the language of shaming people for shaming while you're secretly being like, I love you for flirting. And so that's like the ultimate level of empowerment that we've reached with this third option, this third alternative to Venetia, who is the, how dare you shame me? And the Yasmine, who's like, oh, don't, like, I'm being slut shamed. You know what I'm saying? Like, but now we've got this new breed and I freaking love this woman.
But I did think it was an interesting choice that as they're literally talking about the inappropriate attire she's wearing, I mean, Eric decides to take his shirt off entirely.
He has done this before. Remember when he was changing out of his pants on the training floor in the first season? I have seen people change their shirts at work, but they were wearing an undershirt. Correct.
Yes.
It's also weird that Eric would be wearing, this might be European, but it's weird that Eric would be wearing a button down without an undershirt under it in America, at least. Yeah. It's unusual.
So anyway, so then someone says opening price $430, we're expecting a $480 close. So we already talked about just this whole idea of the IPO discount. Okay. So Robert then walks onto the floor and Venetia says, where the hell were you? Robert says, please don't, I can't do this now. And Venetia asks, are you all right? Because now she's sensing that like something is actually really wrong. And then Yaz asks, Robert, what are you doing here? Who's with Henry? Remember, he's supposed to be at the NASDAQ, or actually, no, he's supposed to be at whatever the stock exchange is because we're in London. So it's not the New York Stock Exchange, but he's supposed to be with Henry to like ring the bell, the opening bell. And everyone is starting to see that something is wrong with Robert. And so Eric then says, Rob, I need to talk to you. So we all think he's going to be fired because after the conversation last night. So Rishi
especially
says,
since he looks like visibly distraught.
Yes.
Like,
yeah. Well, he starts crying on the trading floor.
Right.
Which
is like in and of itself, old school fireable offense. Like isn't really, but like, you know.
Yeah. So Rishi says, hey, soft lad, wow, you've got the dead eyes of a porn star. What happened? And Robert says, fuck off. And then again, he starts to cry. So him and Eric then walk almost like to like the elevator bank. And Robert apologizes and says he's sorry that he was so unprofessional. Eric tells him not to apologize. So I guess he's like starting to empathize a little bit. Eric asks what happened, to which Robert says he lost a client. And Eric is just like, huh? That's all? Because it's true, he lost a client, but it's like he lost her because she died. But he doesn't say that. He just says, I lost a client.
Well, again, I don't know if Eric fully appreciates, I couldn't tell. I wasn't sure if Eric fully appreciates that someone has died.
Oh, no, he definitely didn't. When Robert says, I lost a client, Eric assumes that he like means that he just lost the client, not that the client died on him.
It's not 100% clear that that's all he assumes and that he doesn't also read the other meaning into it and still like, who fucking cares? Someone died. Let's go. I don't know.
It's possible. I read it much more as him being like, holy shit, why is this man crying?
I'm leaving it open to both interpretations because, by the way, I actually think to Eric, it's much worse to lose a client, to lose Phelim. That is something that made him question his entire life versus, oh, someone died? Like, get over it. I'm just opening the door to that.
But also, like, if someone dies, you do lose them in both ways. So,
but then, like, Eric would be like, well, you still have the firm, you know? Like, who cares if you lost the hedge fund manager? The money's still there.
But he does say, are you going to stop being such a pussy? Say it with me. I'm a man and I'm relentless. And Robert does. They keep saying it. And then finally, as he makes Robert scream, I'm a man and I'm relentless, Eric says, all right, let's go do our jobs. He walks away. And then Robert's like, wait, what did you want to talk about? Because again, he wanted to fire him, but then he didn't in the moment.
Well, and when they're going through this chant, which to me felt so forced, it almost reminded me of that scene in Wolf of Wall Street where like Matthew McConaughey is doing that like chest pounding thing with like the humming. And I know McConaughey like ad-libbed that or whatever. There's this whole like legend around that scene. I actually think that scene is stupid. Just my hot take on it. But this feels so forced. The only explanation to me that lets them off the hook with this is that Eric is out of his mind on cocaine, hung over, questioning his existence, trying to wrestle with the consequences of how he is going to seize power and all these things. And as he's doing the I am a man and I am a relentless chant with Robert, halfway through the chant, as it's building in intensity, it stops being about Robert for Eric and starts being about Eric for Eric.
Oh, 100%.
And you kind of see the camera zoom in on his face to give you that meaning.
Yeah.
But frankly, I hated the scene. Like, it was too much. It did not ring true. I think it was a missed opportunity for so much. I almost rather Robert didn't participate in this at all. Because where we go with this is Eric walks back to the desk. we have Kenny approach Eric and say, I can smell it on you, and is basically quietly and discreetly calling Eric out on having quote unquote relapsed, because we know that Kenny took him in after this bender. And then you see Eric get this in his mind of, oh, you're going to tell me what to do and you're going to be my Jiminy Cricket conscience. I'm going to fire you. And we'll go through that scene. But to me, it would have felt much more authentic if Eric had simply come into the trading floor, forget about Robert, forget about this whole plot line, changed his shirt, been rude to his daughters, been a bad dad, had the smell of everything on him. Kenny said something, and that's what set Eric off. I could have done without this whole Robert plotline here, because it rang so false to me, to get us in the mind space of Eric now making the snap decision that he does with Kenny, that he almost immediately seems to emotionally.
Well, it's like, instead of firing people who like actually were not good at their jobs, Robert is not good at his job.
Right.
He literally shows up crying on the morning of the IPO, isn't with the client. Yaz is not that great at her job. And Kenny is. He's doing only adults in the room. And so
he's been good to Eric.
He's been good to Eric. Whatever. So let's go through the conference room.
But yeah, I was very upset by that scene creatively. I think it was a terrible creative decision.
So they go into the conference room. Kenny, again, obviously has no idea what's coming. He says, this morning's shaking up pretty good. Phone's ringing off the hook. And then Kenny asks, do you want to talk about what prompted the relapse? And Eric says, I'm not like you, Ken. I don't need judgment from you. And Kenny says, this isn't judgment. This is empathy. Eric says, that's worse. I have to let you go. And Kenny's just like, what are you talking about? Eric says, you'll have a very healthy redundancy package. And Kenny is like, I've been performing. And again, it's true. He's like the best on the desk, I would argue. Eric says part of my new role is making tough decisions. And Kenny asks, on the morning of an IPO, by the way, this IPO has still not happened. Like, it still has to go off without a hitch. You're firing him on the morning of the IPO? Are you?
And you see that register in Eric's eyes. He's like, shit.
Oh, shit.
Like, oh, yeah, I am doing this. This does seem like a terrible decision.
It is. I mean,
But now he's made his bed. He's going to lie in it, you know?
And so then Kenny says, look, I mortgage up the fucking hilt. I just got married. You drained the open bar at my wedding. Jesus Christ. Is this some sort of signal to the others? And Eric says, I'll give you whatever recommendation you need. Kenny then asks Eric, I ask you to reconsider this. You were in a state. I looked after you. And Eric says, you made a practical decision. You looked after me because I pay you, which I actually don't think.
I don't think Kenny did that at all because of that power dynamic, but that's why Eric would do it.
Right. So a phone then rings. Venetia walks in, says that Kenny's wife has been calling. His wife called 3 times. It's urgent. So as Kenny goes out, Eric is super upset in the conference room, and he just keeps saying to himself, like, I'm a man and I'm relentless. Like, you can see he's like having a meltdown. Kenny then comes back in and he says, Eric, this is wrongful dismissal and I will take you to the fucking tribunal, which is, court for the UK peeps. And Eric replies, I decide who lives and who dies here. Kenny says, can you hear yourself? And Eric replies, yes, for the first time in a long time I can. Now leave quietly, or shall we bring up your history, the litany of sins against a specific colleague? I've been generous. I've acted with compassion. Now pack your fucking box and leave. So Kenny then says to him, wipe yourself off. You're dripping, which reminds me of Clement. Like, it was a similar thing where like when they fired him and he was like dripping, but only bleeding. Now it's Eric who's like dripping.
Oh, that's a really good, bringing up Clement back. That adds so much depth to this.
Yeah.
And I think it's this moment with Eric of he is panicked to assert himself, all because of this one seed that Adler planted. And he's totally imploding here. Like, he's ashamed of himself and he's taking it out on Kenny. And I love that that's where they went with it, because it feels so painful. But how it escalated to that point, I don't think we earned it in this episode. And that's why I was so disappointed with this. I would have loved for this to be the outcome with a much more slow, subtle build up to it, rather than all of a sudden Eric melting down, shouting, I'm a man and I'm relentless, and then whispering it to himself to convince him that he actually is doing the right thing. It just didn't feel very authentic to his character.
Yeah. So Kenny says, I pity you. I know that shame, as he walks out. And by the way, the next scene, you do see Eric's 2 kids on Yaz's desk, like, see a thing of Coke. And they're like, what is this? And she's like, and like, obviously.
Oh,
like,
really? Oh, I didn't even see
grabs
that.
it away and hands them a pen.
Watching. Oh my God.
Yeah, no,
So she has Coke at the office now?
I don't know if it was her or if it was Eric's, because I think that they're like sort of next to each other. But like,
him from night out in his shirt pocket or whatever. Oh my God.
But so Kenny then walks over to Yaz and says, how could you do this to me? Right? Because she thinks that Yaz had said something to Eric, which like she did, but it wasn't on purpose. It was like a throwaway. And that was more of just an excuse.
She has no idea. And she wasn't trying to hurt Kenny.
Yeah. So Eric then comes out, tells his kids that Sweet Pea's going to watch them, says that his wife is trying to punish him. And Sweet Pea is like, with your own kids? Eric tells her to find a sitter. And then he says, today is the only day that matters, above 480 kids. And then in the last scene, I wrote the New York Stock Exchange, which is not, because again, it's in London, but like, you know what I mean?
Stock Exchange.
The London Stock Exchange. That would make more sense. And so Rob is there with Henry. And he says, this exchange, we supply their energy. He then adds that he's a bit scared. He says, after ringing the bell, this is all going to feel rather pathetic and anticlimactic. And Robert says, absolutely not. Look at this. You're going to feel alive. He then shakes Henry's hands. They say good job. And then they go to ring the bell. They say 3, 2, 1. And then all the lights go out and it's like a blackout, which is a little bit like too
on the nose.
Yeah. He's like, we supply their energy. And then it's like, there's a blackout.
I know. So, thanks for planting that seed. Something's going to happen, obviously. Yeah. But I do think Robert telling Henry that he's going to feel alive is very significant, given that Robert has just witnessed this death and Eric has brought him back to life vis-a-vis this deal. Yet we know from everything else we've learned in this show that no one is ever satisfied. That achieving the thing, doing the whatever, only brings death, destruction, hate. And we're not even going to get there with Lumi because the lights all go out.
Yep.
So I thought this episode was too heavy-handed versus the subtlety and the brilliant writing that we had in the season finale. And the character arcs it's like we had to build Robert up briefly just to tear him down again. We have Eric in what should be his moment of triumph, totally melting down and falling apart without Harper. I would have loved to have given him a little bit more runway to get to that point. But he gets dealt like the hand of justice way too early, it seems, in terms of like his own meltdown. Yeah. I'm sad to see Kenny go.
I know, but he's
gone for good. Oh,
yeah. He might make a cameo, but
he's got a great wrongful dismissal. It's funny. You had me watch that show, Your Friends and Neighbors. And I was like, This guy has the best wrongful dismissal case of all time. I know there wouldn't be a show or whatever, but then I saw Kenny's and I was like, Kenny's is better.
Seriously. All right. So really fast, because this has been going on. Like we're literally at 3 hours. Who are we bullish and who are we bearish on?
Bearish on Robert still. Get rid of him. Looks like Harper has a path to redemption and it's coming up quick. So bearish on Robert. Let's get rid of him once and for all. I know everyone's like, he doesn't come back for season 4. I don't need him to come back for episode 2. And Harper, I'm so excited to see where this goes. What about you?
Yeah. I mean, bearish on Yaz right now and bullish. I have to go Harper because she's the only one. She's the only one. Everyone else is just like, they're all bad. So anyway, this was fun.
Happy birthday. Thank you for spending 3 hours of your birthday with me talking about our favorite show.
So we'll see if we're back next week. Again, if we are not, there's a chance I might have had a baby. We're going to keep doing this as long as we can. And then again, there might be a little mini break. So thank you guys. Again, if you are enjoying this, please leave us a written 5-star review. Remember, we do put this up on YouTube as well. So if you want to watch on YouTube, if you are listening to the audio version, you can always find us on YouTube. And we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.